Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, where I believe we are back on all our streaming platforms.
I have no idea.
I think we're back. And I got to give a shout-out to our streaming fans out there because
They just hung in there?
they didn't have audio the whole show, DB. And they're just hanging out, leaving comments, listening through other ways. Like, I appreciate you guys. That was pretty cool.
Oh, boy.
At one point, we had 1,000 people not hearing a thing and just hanging out waiting for us.
I wonder, so they must have been listening.
Probably through the app
Yeah.
or like on the 590 website because that was still working, or TuneIn was working as well. And they were just riding with us. So I appreciate them for sure.
I can confirm it is back.
We're back, Shano?
Yes.
I can confirm.
Guess who's back?
To this day.
You big Shady guy?
No.
No.
Yes.
Shady Aftermath?
Eminem?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Huge M guy.
That's why you wanted to go to the Detroit Bowl, right?
Yeah. What is that?
I don't know.
It's not the bad boy. I know that.
No, Bad Boys Mower Bowls in New York City.
Everybody getting a mower.
Although I do gotta
Did you like what you could be getting? Like, ferry rides in Staten Island and
what's
rockets.
What's the goodie bag there?
I don't know. I haven't seen the itinerary.
I'm interested because I don't associate New York City with lawnmowers. Like there's a disconnect for me there,
So my sister lives 4.6 miles from the stadium.
Okay. You guys gonna hang out?
Yeah, I don't know. She'll be here.
She'll be for the holidays.
I wanted to call her though. She needs to turn that thing into a B&B.
Oh yeah, her place.
Yeah, but she's such a germaphobe. It may be crucial.
Yeah, I would not. I'll be honest. I probably, if it was a place I lived, I wouldn't let people stay there.
Really?
No.
Oh yeah, have that.
No, I don't like people in my house when I'm there.
Oh, good point.
And I don't think you do either.
No, but I don't know.
It's different when you're not there. You're like, I don't care. If I'm not there, what do I care?
I just think the opportunity to make money.
That's fair. I just don't like people around my stuff.
Out on that idea?
Yeah.
I don't trust them?
Nah. You know me. I don't trust a lot of people.
Your drawers and stuff like that. You know about Boxing Day.
I know that it exists in Canada, and that's all.
Yeah.
Because I
know all about Boxing Day.
I'm sure you do. No, did you guys have one of those when you were a kid, like one of those giant wall calendars?
No.
Okay, so we would have one in our kitchen. And
my mom didn't like stuff on the walls.
Oh, gotcha. So we would do that, or we put it on the fridge or whatever, and everybody's schedule would be on there, like all the kids' activities and stuff. And I would always look at it when I was, just a wee Indian boy, and I'd be like,
with the comb over?
Did I have a comb over when I was a kid?
I don't know. The picture with Brooke is kind of weird.
Well, it's weird because I'm wearing a Miami shirt.
You didn't know any better.
I didn't, but also did not know we were meeting Brooke Behringer that day.
Like, oh, wait, this is conflict of interest.
I didn't even think about it till later, and I was like, oh, this sucks.
Kids will be kids.
But
at least you're not like the guys that go on unofficials or unofficials and they have other teams' gear on.
No. You know what it was? So my grandma used to buy me whatever sports stuff she could find because she knew I liked sports, but she didn't really have a concept of –
On your mom's side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't really have a concept of, like, teams, of, like, what teams I liked or what teams mattered here or whatever. So she would go to these, like, garage sales and flea markets or whatever, just give me whatever she found that fit me. And so I had this, like, menagerie of different – of different teams and stuff.
It's a heck of a word.
Menagerie. It's 7:05 in the morning. We're getting you SAT prepped.
Yeah, say that slow. Menagerie.
Right. But yeah, I would look at the calendar and I'd go, Mom, what's Boxing Day? And she'd be like, I don't know. It's a Canadian thing.
Yeah.
And that's all she'd give me. I looked it up one day. I still don't know.
Well aware.
I still don't know what it is.
A lot of sales, a lot of shopping.
Yeah, it's like Black Friday
for. It's their post-Christmas celebration.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Celebrate a lot of Boxing Day in the house. Back in the day?
Back in the day.
How you doing this morning, DB?
I'm cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, I didn't sleep a wink.
Just makes two of us.
Yeah. Neither one was by choice either. So.
No. This show gets unhinged enough when we are both well rested. I don't know what to expect today.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
It's just not not going the way I want it to. The old Benning household.
Didn't go the way I expected with the DC hire either.
No, I wouldn't say surprised. It's not exactly what I thought.
So I'll be honest, I was a little surprised, and frankly, I think two things can be true at once. My initial reaction was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
And I also have no idea how it's going to go.
Well, how come your initial reaction was because almost everybody I talked to, I had one guy tell me he's not serious about winning.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I'm not there. My disappointment was I got my
Now,
hope.
why he thought I'd want to hear that, I don't know. Like, maybe I become a sounding board, but.
You do, and people say wild stuff to you. I don't even know why.
Yeah, this was like a diatribe, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah, my initial thought was disappointment because, and this is probably a me problem more than anything, I had let my expectations get to a certain point, right? And part of it is I am going to put part of this on Coach Rhule for kind of saying, hey, this is a highly desired job, and we've got sitting Power 5 defensive coordinators that want this job. So in my head, and this is where it's a me problem, I think to myself like, oh, they're going to land a big fish. They're going to land a big name. And then you go, and then you have the time between when Tony White left and the announcement, and you think, okay, well, if it was John Butler, why wasn't that just announced, right? So to me, it seems like they didn't either get the interest that they wanted or weren't able to come to an agreement. And then they're like, all right, well, we've got a guy in-house that we like enough combined with some of the other hires we make, and we think we can make this work.
Yeah, I think it's probably closer to the latter if I had to guess.
Sure.
But one thing I think, I think we have to clear at least one thing up.
Sure.
Regardless of what you think at the hire, at least know why you don't like it. And if it's because you don't like the way the secondary played last year, that's not a good reason.
I agree, actually.
I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Number one, you had some guys that I didn't feel like, and I think they would be honest and tell you, either shouldn't have been playing as much or playing out of position. Okay, I think they felt like they could be good enough in some other areas where it wouldn't show up the way that it did, and for the most part, it didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you were able to mask a lot of things. Now, when you broke, I mean, that's where you broke.
Yeah. But for the most part, it wasn't that.
So it's like, well, those guys weren't very good. His unit wasn't good, so it's way deeper than that, in my opinion. Now, could you or should you have gotten other guys ready to go? Sure, and I think they were. I do think they tried. I think if you came back to me and you said, you know what, I really would love. For the communication and the teaching and talking to young people, I would like that to be on display more. I would entertain that, but
sure.
Nobody would know that.
Right, because
they're not around.
They're not in it.
Right? So if you're not going to like it, at least don't not like it for the right reason.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
About getting the young guys ready? How much does the timing of his –
It was not good.
Right. Like that has a lot to do with that,
it
right?
It was not good. And – so then you got this catch-22. Again, just my opinion. Mm-hmm. When you got off to the good start, you felt like you were living on borrowed time.
Yeah.
Then it got hectic, and you needed a game, and you didn't want to panic.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, oh, shoot, we just got to get one more. Right? So I think that's basically how the thought process went.
Yeah.
Because I know he told those guys for a fact, it's like, hey, listen, I'll get to know the personalities and get to know you guys later. Right now, this is a crash course,
Nailed it.
And teaching football.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I actually think that's how it went. Now, if they got off to a worse start, you're probably more apt to do some things quicker. If you got off to a much faster start, then this wouldn't even be an issue.
Yeah.
Their problem was they hovered around being good enough to stay in it for the majority of the year. So it made it hard to make wholesale changes, even though, and let's not act like they didn't contemplate it, because I know it's contemplated.
Sure.
So I wouldn't use that as my reason, because if you just looked at the resume, you'd be like, oh, this is a pretty good hire.
Yeah, it's what we all thought when he got hired, right? Is that he was going to be the next defensive coordinator.
Yeah. So
and nobody had a problem with it at the time.
So I'm a little surprised for a different reason, and it's not because I'm basing it on. It's just low hanging fruit, like people that you don't really know enough about what it entails to just be passing that off as fact.
Sure.
Right? Like, could I understand it? Sure. But I tried to tell you guys all year, marrying coverage to fronts and having a new style play behind a front was going to take some time.
Yeah, that's really challenging.
I mean,
can I throw some numbers at you real quick just for
you know who's a really, really good example, but it didn't show up because they were so talented, but they look disjointed?
Ohio State.
1,000%.
You said it all year. Ohio State.
I'm like, go watch them play defense. Something is wrong.
Does it feel like they're cohesive?
Right?
No.
There was a disconnect between Knowles and Johnson.
Yeah.
It just was.
100%.
And he said,
and you got enough dudes that they can overcome that.
Right, but there are some games where you're like, wow, really?
What's happening right now?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we saw it against Oregon.
So, and that had my attention because I felt like, oh, shoot, there are some similarities. Match man and quarters, and do they want to play more two? And, how intricate do you want to be on a 3-by? And you're in cover 2, do you always want to check out of it? And if you do, are you bouncing the – so, they play this technique called there's just a lot that they do that allows them to be in position where you need to know what's going on up front too. And so this is the popular retort. Well, if it's too complicated, then don't do it. You're not going to win a lot of games like that.
Yeah.
You're just not. So –
especially if you're not just more talented than everybody else.
Yeah. And if you want to assess responsibility, like there's a reason I think they started working a lot closer together. By they, I mean Coach White and Coach Butler coming out of timeout breaks. I'd say to Sharpie, be like, hey, did you see on this particular set of downs, it's cool that these guys are actually interacting so you know that you're on the same page, right? I'm afforded the luxury of having Jessica on the sidelines that is in like my ear
and telling you what's going on,
and that can tell me what's going on with the secondary and the D line. So I feel 100% confident that I know why things happen.
And to that point of being on the same page, like Tony White was pretty smart because he hired a D-line coach and a secondary coach that he already knows are on the same page.
Yeah.
In Cooper and Knighton.
Right.
You know, hey, I've seen these guys work together.
Yep.
They're on the same page as me. I'm at this new job. Everybody's on the same page now, right? He's going to be off and running.
100%.
That's good for him. I want to throw some numbers at you real quick because there's this narrative out there about the secondary and the pass defense that it was dramatically worse than last year. You know how many passing yards per game they gave up last year?
You talking about 3 or 4?
23. 2023.
I do not.
210.6. Mm-hmm. You have any idea how many passing yards per game they gave up this year?
Shoot, it seems like it'd be less. I'd say, I don't know, 220.
209.7.
Yeah.
It's within a yard. Now, they were more big play susceptible this year.
That's the thing. When they broke, they broke.
Yeah, so they gave up more touchdown passes than they did last year. It was about a yard more per pass or per completion.
But they took the ball away more too.
They did. And that's one of the things that you're going to give up is if you're a little more aggressive, you're going to give up more big plays.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a little bit of give and take there. They were better. They had 11 interceptions this year. They had 9 last year, so you got 2 more takeaways out of it. And you had your secondary causing some fumbles as well in some big situations. The Illinois game comes to the top of my mind there. Like, this was not a markedly different secondary than the one we were happy with 2 years ago. That's my point.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that John Butler walked into way less than ideal circumstances. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a good DC or not.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I don't either.
That's not the point. But your point is people are mad about it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it. Like I said, I thought they might get a big name, and I was excited. That's it.
Ordinarily, he would be a huge name.
For sure.
It's just that we know him.
Yeah. It's the familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah, it's like if all things considered, and John Butler and Zach Arnett and Simons and Jim Leonard were all up for the job,
we'd probably gravitate towards Jim Leonard because he's got the Big Ten success.
Yeah, see, but I don't know because I don't know, would we?
I think if we're starting from scratch, that's a name people know, and they would be excited about that name because they saw it up close. But outside of that, if you're talking about John Butler versus Simons versus Arnett, I don't think people make that much of a differentiation. Yeah. Honestly, if we don't already know John Butler.
So I'm not defending or endorsing.
But know why you're mad.
I'm just telling you, like, there's a lot. It's just too late. It's just too simplistic to say that. And
I don't think we can talk about the hiring of John Butler without the hiring of Phil Snow.
No, I mean, there's some of that. And so the interesting thing, the part that I think we're all missing is how important this is for Coach Rhule based on where he thinks the offense is going, based on where his strengths are. His strengths are on defense. He thinks this offense has got a chance to be pretty functional. He doesn't worry so much about that. So what would he say? He'd be like, DB, this relationship with my defensive coordinator, I'm pretty weird about stuff like this. Like, it has to be very, very fluid. And he said, hey, for all that was going on, I love the way that our defense worked at practice. He said this at the presser, right? I love the way our defense worked. I like our guys' capacity to work. I want that.
Yeah.
So I think there was this thing where when it came down to it, whether you felt like other guys were going to be committed to other jobs or be locked in for a little while longer or whatever, right?
Because timing here matters, right?
Timing absolutely matters.
Yeah. Like, timing matters a lot here.
What I think is what he felt like would get them over the hump is continuity and work.
Which is on brand for him.
And that's why he said he didn't want to really change the fronts and kind of the style because he wanted continuity.
And you've recruited guys and developed guys to a certain playing style and system, right?
And so I just think at the end of the day I think that had a ton to do with it. Like, I really do.
And I think the timing portion here is really important, right? With a 12-team expanded playoff, there's way more guys in the mix later in the season than there ever has been before, right? Playing meaningful games.
Yeah.
We saw this 2 years ago. I am convinced. I may be wrong. I may be crazy. But I'm convinced that Luke Fickell was going to be named the next head coach at Notre Dame if Notre Dame had been willing to wait until after Cincinnati was in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that's true. I've read enough stories and done enough digging into it that I think that's true. That might not be accurate, but let's, for the sake of this argument, say that it is. They didn't hire Luke Fickell because the timing of it mattered more. Like, they saw what they had in-house. They saw, okay, is Luke Fickell good enough to wait a detrimental amount of time, they felt? Is he that much better than Marcus Freeman? And ultimately their answer was no.
Yeah, and one of the things I really am curious to see, and because I don't know, is, Coop had this uncanny ability to recruit guys that I'm not going to say a lot of other people wouldn't, but were particular fits for him and his mentality. And that's what he wanted. It took over in the coaching. It took over in the meetings, in the rooms. Like, the guys that exuded his confidence and kind of his dog mentality were the guys that flourished.
Yeah.
The guys that didn't were the guys that wouldn't. Now, that doesn't mean they're not good players.
Yeah, it's just not a good fit.
Just not a good fit.
Yeah, those are, I think, a lot of the guys we're seeing in the transfer portal.
So what you're going to see now is now Coach Butler will have a chance to put his stamp on a fresh set of guys. will they play the way that he wants them to, right? Where
with a full off season, with a spring, with
you're
bowl
not
practices
playing
and
as
spring
much
practices.
man as you were a year ago. You had to be a little more savvy. You had to be a little more heady. Like we kept saying, this is what was driving me crazy. Oh, we need to get more athletic back there. You're not going to get very many guys that are going to test better than Deshaun Singleton. You're just not.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he's an elite level athlete. Why didn't he play like that though?
I'd say, does he play as fast as he is going to test?
Because the level of it's comfortability, right?
Yeah.
Did I say the word?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I say the word.
Yes. TK broke it down for me once with the little hyphens. I just wanted to make sure that it
I'm
was
not
correct.
good at like the pronunciation.
Phonetics.
Like the
You should read some of my charts sometimes.
the
for
symbols and
sports.
stuff.
It's
I
like-
don't. Yeah, I don't.
I don't know.
I need to hear it.
Yeah.
I can't just look at a pronunciation and be, oh yeah.
So anyway, like I'll be interested to see if because sometimes if you play smarter, it looks a lot different.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you
Mike Brown and Deshaun Singleton wouldn't test anywhere near the same. But one guy is supremely confident in what he was doing.
Yeah.
So he played that way.
he played super fast.
He played that way.
You know who was not a good tester? Barrett Root.
Yeah.
Terrible tester.
Yeah, 100%.
You know who played way more than fast enough, not only at Nebraska but in the NFL as well?
No, I get it.
Barrett Root. I believe, I think this number is accurate, and I hope I'm not blaspheming him here. I believe he ran a 4.8 at the combine.
Well, I could see it.
Like, that is not a fast dude playing linebacker in the NFL. Guess who played for 9 years in the NFL?
Yeah.
That guy.
So we do not have audio, Shane.
It went out on us, it appears.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm really,
I jinxed it. I'm sorry.
really happy.
Blame me.
I'm thrilled. Coming up on the show today, we will have plenty more about Nebraska, their defensive coordinator hires. They made a couple other hires as well. I mentioned Phil Snow. They made a hire on the defensive line as well.
And Ryan brings up a good point, right? He goes, didn't you allude to once upon a time on the show that Phil Snow was brought in to relate to kids that Butler may be struggling to communicate with?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
And here we have
That was not a dream, Ryan. I did tell you that.
And here we have Phil Snow on staff full time.
And he gets and we'll get into it, and he gets a guy that I think can help him in the recruiting trail when you put him with Simpson in certain states too.
100%.
So
Brian-
whether it works or not, I don't know.
Brian Christopherson coming up at 8. Kevin Sjuts coming up at 8:30, and we'll talk some national college basketball with Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports coming up at 9. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We may or may not be live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I have no idea, but that's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here from the Pillar Exterior Stage. We're getting into all sorts of stuff regarding the defensive coaches hirings, which you brought up one that we hadn't gotten to yet. I assume that's Terry Brayton.
Yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs assistant defensive line coach for the last 8 years.
Well, there's lots. I mean, I think it's clear by what they wanted to do with their staff where they want to recruit.
Yeah, Missouri. They're big into Missouri.
I mean, you're going 500-mile radius and you're going Florida.
Yeah.
They
100%.
already know they're good in Texas.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's it's definitely intentional.
Oh, 100%. You bring back Phil Simpson from Florida State, who'd been there for a hot minute. And you bring in Terry Brayton for the Kansas City Chiefs assistant defensive line coach. And now you've got both Brayton and Mosey from Missouri. You've got Simpson down there in Florida. And then obviously you got the ties to Texas that they've had from the established relationships they've had there. That's like you said, I think it's super intentional. And not a bad game plan. Those are some places you want to recruit. Nebraska hasn't been nearly as active in Missouri prior to this coaching staff as they probably needed to be.
Yeah, you can tell it's intentional. So I think there's a couple things at play here. But again, this is independent of. So I think some of what you hear is me talking through into pushback, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do is, I always say this, right? Like I'm just like a conduit for perspective, right? That's it.
Yeah.
right? So as much as you want to make up your mind, like I'll read you one. And this is one of, I don't know, probably 10. So I wouldn't say it's a huge number.
Okay.
Okay.
Let some people reach out to you.
Yeah. Okay. So this one says, I got to read this. Now this is just yesterday after the hire. He says, Rhule isn't serious about winning. That much is obvious. Please, just no revisionist history from the media after he's gone. You can't continue to keep and hire bad coaches and magically expect to win. This isn't a serious football program. Fans just need to finally realize that and set expectations accordingly. My problem is that my expectations are to someday build towards competing for championships, but the problem is the program itself doesn't even have those expectations. It's a joke. Does that seem a little harsh?
I mean, it seems idiotic, if I'm being honest. Like, my initial reaction, if somebody has that take from what we've seen from this coaching staff, I think it's stupid.
Like, I didn't. Well, let's not.
No, that you asked my reaction. I think that's a dumb way to perceive this, because it's so short-sighted and also just not accurate. So, like, okay, so he fires a guy he's known his entire coaching career mid-season and hires a former head coach who's one of the best offensive minds in the country. Everybody agrees on that, right? Is there anybody who's like Dana Holgorsen, not a serious hire?
Yeah.
Anybody in the world? Not a soul, right? So, A, you're wrong there. And he fired a guy that he's really close with mid-season in order to do it. Okay? That's number one. Number two, John Butler isn't a bad football coach. We don't know what he is as a defensive coordinator, but do you think the NFL is like, hey, let's just keep hiring these bad football coaches? Oh, wait a second. No, the Buffalo Bills have had really good defenses and really good defensive backs for the entire time John Butler's been there. He's good at what he does. Now, I don't know if he's good at this other thing. None of us do. But to say that he's a bad football coach is idiotic. Like, it's straight up dumb. And then to say, oh, they're not serious about winning. Well, what have the Kansas City Chiefs done for the last 8 years, DB? Have they been any good for the last 8 years?
They're pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good, aren't they? How's Kansas City Chiefs defense right now?
Pretty good.
How's their defensive line right now?
It's pretty good.
So if you go hire a defensive line coach from a team that is, you're being a little facetious here, better than pretty good, then you're not serious about winning because you're going to get a professional guy, a guy that's been a professional defensive line coach for 8 years, and you're trying to say that's not a serious hire. You go and get a guy that is regarded by everyone as a recruiting guru in Florida in Phil Simpson, and that's not a serious hire? What are we even talking about here? Do we know if John Butler's a good DC? No. That's the only thing we don't know. The only thing. Does Phil Snow have a pretty good track record as a defensive coordinator?
Yes.
Yes, he does. Does he have a pretty good track record of working with Matt Rhule?
Yes.
Yes, he does. So what are we even talking about here?
I wonder if
like that. I know you don't like it when I call people stupid. That's stupid.
Sometimes I just read these things and I'm like,
it may or may not work.
It's just, yeah,
that's not it.
Exactly. Okay. So, but that was like, there's a handful.
That's dumb.
There's a handful.
You know what you always say to me, DB? People can make you dumber.
I'm like, how do you it's very few times where I feel like I don't even know what to say.
That's
the last couple times, like I don't even know what this, like that I just can't talk to you.
Those are the kind of people I don't know why you talk to.
So, I go back to this combination because obviously, like Coach and I, we talk, right? So I have to pit like what is said to me versus what I see.
Yeah.
Then I have to see like the validity to it. And then it's like you're emotionally invested. And then I'm emotionally invested across the board. So I have to, like, my perspective, I have to be wide open. Right. So, like, to process information, I have to, again, it's kind of just what I do, though. It's like I look at multiple angles, see where it fits what I naturally think, and then I try to eat the meat and spit out the bones, right?
And you try and adjust what you think.
So I'm like, so let's. So talking to Caleb,
Mhm.
Coach Butler says, You're clearly in the 105, going to be playing a ton in the bowl game. What did he say? Clearly in the 105, going to be playing a ton.
I mean, I remember if you want me to tell you.
Yeah, what did on me? I heard that.
Mhm.
I think you said I'm going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Are you just cutting through the chase?
That's how I would take it.
That's how Caleb took it.
Yeah, I would imagine, because that's how Caleb is.
So I'm like, okay.
There's some kids that are really going to vibe.
That works. That works for him.
For certain kids.
That works for him.
Yeah. There's some kids that
I don't know if, like, you could say that to, like, Rio.
Yeah,
right?
you can't say it to everybody.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of that, I'm like, ooh.
But that's with every coach.
No, listen,
right?
I'm not.
I know.
I'm not down on it.
Yeah.
I'm not.
But it's different.
I'm not on it. I'm trying to give perspective to how it really goes, because everybody has these wild. I see a blown coverage between Giff and Singleton, or Hartzog missed time to jump. So therefore, this, and this.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like, it's more to it than that.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, let me finish this
Go
real
for
quick.
it. Yeah.
So my man B asked me, I'm just calling him B. He goes, I don't understand what you mean when you say disconnect between position coaches. When the DC calls a play, doesn't that mean that the players know what to do on that play? Apparently, it's not like offense. He's not. I don't think he's being sarcastic.
Fair.
He goes, probably a dumb question. He gives me the emoji. And he is involved, like, part of his job is to kind of know this stuff.
Mhm.
Right? So I don't think he's I don't think he's being sarcastic. So I didn't finish the response because it's kind of convoluted, but it's not. And I was getting ready to say I didn't even hit send. For examples, if I'm in an even front, okay, and I'm playing quarters coverage,
Mhm.
and they motion to, like, too tight or to empty,
Mhm.
immediately I have to make a check, right? I may go match man. I may go cover two. I may go two man. I could do lots of things.
Mhm.
What that does, though, is it changes the front in terms of where I fit in the run game.
Mhm.
Now, let's say they go back from double tights to a normal 2x2, like just two wide receivers
Mhm.
on each side. Back comes back. That changes my fits in the run game.
Yeah.
So you have to communicate those kinds of things, because you get a pre-snap call.
Right. But the pre-snap call and the actual call,
Yeah, you may
not always the same thing.
Yeah, you may have to check out of it.
It's like if
that's the difference in what I'm talking about, where you have to fit in the
Yeah.
run game, and it has to be married to how you're playing up front.
To go to his point about offense, it's like if a quarterback sees a coverage, he checks out of it, and the running back or the tight end doesn't know what they're supposed to do.
And sometimes we hear wide receivers say, well, I thought that was a screen, but it was a run.
Or you see a running back miss a blitz pickup after a check's been called.
Yeah.
It's not because the running back didn't know the initial play. It's because they missed the check.
Yeah.
That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back. Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, getting into it on the defensive hires and defensive coordinator talk. Denny, the real Denny, the good Denny, DP, says, I don't think you're wrong about the stupid comment, but stupid people don't know they're stupid. It's the same thing as pigs. Pigs don't know they stink because they're in it. He says, I think DB dislikes it because you think you can coach it out of them, which I think is true.
Probably.
You think there's hope for people? I am less likely to think there's hope for people.
I just can't get behind, like, defeatist attitudes.
Yeah.
Like that.
I agree.
So, like, at the end of the day, and I remember I get along with my staff beautifully at the high school. We had it was a little bit of a tense moment, probably in week 3.
Okay.
I'll never forget this. Week 3, we're sitting around in the locker room, and we got off to a slow start.
You guys are getting through some growing pains.
Young team,
Yeah.
and whatever. So we're kind of on edge, and one of our coaches kept waxing poetic about another team in the state. And like just out of nowhere, man, I'm like, look, man,
Mhm.
we got good players too. We have to coach better.
Yeah.
Like, knock it off.
Yeah.
Right. So I probably overreacted because when I said it,
Mhm.
I stood up and I walked into the other side of the room. Right. Even though I only said like 5 seconds of information.
Sure.
Like I think, and I'm like around those, like I'm never like, well, you saw me just get bullied the other day, right? Like I'm never like that around those guys usually. So when I am, it's very pronounced.
Yeah, people pay attention.
And so one of the coaches came back over later on after practice, and he goes, that was new. What was that about? And I go, look, man, I said, I just come from a place where I don't care what anybody else is doing. Like, just give me the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, okay, I get it. But so does that mean what we were saying wasn't true? And I said, no, there might be some truth to it, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
We have no idea.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So like that's my temp. That's me in a nutshell.
And it's different. And like, there's been situations I've been in, I know both as a player and coach, where I know that we are not in a position where if things go anywhere close to normally to be in a ball game.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's the nature of NA.
But mine is just life though. Like,
right.
You got to think there's been some stretches where I've just been incorrigible, like a grade A turd, right? So anything is possible.
Yeah.
That's how I think.
Well, and to my point, like that's sort of the nature of NAIA basketball, right? Is you're going to play some D2 and D1s teams and get your head beat in. You're going to play some other really good NAIA teams, get your head beat in. You're going to play some really bad teams and you're going to beat their heads in, right? Like that's just kind of the nature of that level of basketball. But the point is there's things that you can do positively even within the worst set of circumstances. And I also think it's really one of the things I get super frustrated about for having been someone who's been in some really bad circumstances is people that think they're in the worst circumstance. And it's like, okay, like it's really not that bad. I get it's not the way you want it to be, but so I need you to understand it's not that bad.
So you know who's going to say that?
Who?
You heard it yesterday at the press conference. Instead of focusing on who's not here, let's focus on who is here.
Yeah.
That was Coach Rhule. Like that's just how he thinks.
Right.
Right. So I think he knows where some of the questions could be or potential variables. So he's trying to insulate.
Yeah.
Hey, I lost this here. I need to replace this with here. He's really good here. I may have upgraded here, but he's not as good here.
Let me bring some reinforcements.
Let me bring in some reinforcements here.
Well, and
you could just see how he built that thing.
Speaking of reinforcements, I do think a thing that we haven't talked enough about yet, and I know we've only been on the air for 45 minutes, but over the discourse of the last 12 hours or 15 hours, whatever it's been, is I'll be honest, and I don't know, I don't have any information. This is just the gut feeling I have on this. I think if Phil Snow would not have agreed to come back in a full-time capacity, I don't think John Butler would have been promoted.
I'm inclined to agree with that a little bit.
I think that's
I like you could convince me.
I think it's really, really important because here's
the peace of mind thing.
Well, not just the peace of mind, but also you
get two really smart guys and an ultra good communicator too.
100%. And you kind of remove the worry about not having called college defenses in a long time and for not very often, right? John Butler has one or 2 years of 10 years ago, 12 years ago of defensive coordinator experience with Penn State, right? That's all. So I think that's the concern most people have is like, hey, he hasn't really done this.
You could probably convince me.
Phil Snow has done this a lot, really successfully at a super high level with this head coach. So you know that relationship's good. You know that's there, right? John Butler wouldn't still be here if Coach Rhule didn't think he could work with him, whether it was as defensive backs coach or as defensive coordinator, right? So the way I look at it is, okay, you have a guy here that you think is good at what he does, but you've got some question marks like you were talking about. Not a ton of experience as a DC, certainly none recently. And then you've got a guy over here like, okay, if I can bring...
Well, you could just go to recruiting.
Yeah.
Like you could tell he's tried to really... plus having analysts now, you could tell he could take some luxuries in some other places because he can maneuver chess pieces, especially about who can get on the road. And
I'll say, yeah, you don't even have to put John Butler on the road.
And it's not even a Butler thing.
Right, but if you didn't want to.
I'm just saying how I think he thinks.
Or maybe that's what inclines Phil Snow to come back is maybe Phil Snow knows I don't have to do the grind of traveling to recruit all the time also.
Yeah.
Like that makes it an easier job for a guy that's closer to retirement than he is on the front end of his career.
Because on the flip side of that, what did we just read yesterday about Belichick's demands? Was that not crazy?
Yeah.
So if you hopefully you've heard it, but two separate staffs.
Mm-hmm.
The on-the-field coaching staff.
Yeah.
Then his own recruiting eval department that would be different.
He's basically talking about NFL scouting department.
It's incredible.
That's it.
And that his son is the coach in waiting.
Which that to me is the most ridiculous demand.
But what he's telling you is, I want to play to my strengths.
100%. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Nobody's going to lay it out as bluntly as Belichick does, because that's what Bill Belichick does. But I honestly think we're sort of seeing that move.
Well, you for sure are seeing it in Lincoln.
Yes, towards that model anyway, right?
You're for sure seeing it in Lincoln.
Maybe I'm out of line here. You think Dana Holgerson's going on the road?
Yeah, so I think he's wherever you need him.
Right.
But no.
I don't you need Dana Holgerson.
I mean, you've got a lot of guys. Dvorak.
You've got a lot of really good recruiters.
So it's like I see the game. I know.
Yeah.
What I think he wants to do, I don't know. I feel like if he talks to us, he feels like he's going to have to probably talk to everybody. But I would just ask him.
You don't have to, Coach. We're special.
Like I think that's what he thinks. I think he thinks what we need is we got to get a couple fellas. Mm-hmm. But we just need a palate cleanse of teaching football.
And
give me competitive guys, we'll teach you football.
And
that's what I think he wants to do.
Because we talk about this with players all the time. We don't talk about it with coaches as much. You're going to put guys in positions to use their strengths to be successful, right? And it's the thing. I've said this a million times, and I'll continue to say it because it's the best example I've ever seen of it in professional sports is the San Antonio Spurs model. They didn't care what guys couldn't do. They cared what they could do. And they built a team around what guys could do. And that's what you're seeing, I think, in Lincoln with the coaching staff. And again, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't. But I understand how we got here.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not a place where you're looking at it and you go, oh, this can't work.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't sit there and say, oh, this guy's not serious about winning. That's asinine. Like I don't know what else to call it. This is a guy that is putting people, real football people, by the way, real serious football people in positions to do what they do best. Let's not sit here and pretend that Tony White was on anybody's list 2 years ago. Not a soul. When Tony White got announced 2 years ago, everyone was like, who? What's a 3-3-5? Can that win in the Big Ten? Do we remember these conversations? And now the sky is falling because Tony White's gone, right? But this isn't, who the names that were out there 2 years ago. Everybody wanted Elijah Robinson, who, by the way, had never coordinated defense before either.
What was that guy's name?
They wanted him from Texas Tech. Like, oh, man, like maybe we should make him D coordinator and get him in here and whatever, right? Do we remember these conversations? Because they weren't that long ago. And now we're doing it all over again.
And by the way, not coming off a good year either.
Yeah. And like we sit here and act like we don't remember.
Franz's guy too, so I don't think he would have.
No, I don't think he'd have poached him.
Yeah.
But this was when he was at A&M still, right?
He does. He's interesting like that. Where we had a conversation a while ago where he was talking about what to expect on the job and loyalty and he was talking a lot about like some rules that Coach Parcells told him when they were courting him for the Jets job. Coach Rhule. And one of the three things that he talked about is your best friends will let you down. Know that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I just was thinking to myself, I think him understanding that at an earlier age has allowed him to process through what's happened the last basically in the last year.
Yeah.
he's kind of developed that temperament.
Who are the two guys on staff that you think you would closest with?
They're both gone, Coop and Knight.
And the third guy probably sat, right?
Yeah.
And he had to demote him, right?
That's a good point.
Like, just think about that for a second next time you think he's not serious about winning football. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla, Brian Christopherson coming up next from Husker247 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by Brian Christopherson, Husker247. What's up, BC?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, BC. How are things in message board 24/7 Sportsland?
You know what? I come and go on the message board. I think it's okay. I feel like so far, for everything that's happened, people have kept themselves away from the ledge and are like, all right, I'm going to see what happens now. They know the departure lane was filled up for the last week or week and a half, and now they're, I think, hopeful about some news about additions in the next couple of weeks. So I think people are in a decent frame of mind, honestly.
It seems like the people you're talking to are much more reasonable than the people I'm hearing from. Because if you were to ask me,
I would concur.
And I don't, I don't spend as much time on the message boards as some people do, but it seems like this John Butler is a guy that they pulled off of the street and that has never coached football before, and that the D-line coach is just some bum that they found, not somebody that's been coaching for the 2-time Super Bowl champions. Like if I was to just judge by the reaction, I would have thought that we hired from a Pee-wee staff. That's how I would have taken it.
Yeah, well, a couple things. When Terrence Knighton was hired, his name came out that he was going to be on staff. And obviously people knew of his NFL career and the pot roast nickname and all that.
Had he ever recruited?
Yeah, well, yeah, he didn't really have a resume as a coach hardly.
Yep.
And so for like 3 to 4 days, the conversation was actually, people forget this, people thought he was like the assistant, like he was going to be like an analyst or, you know what I mean? Like an assistant D-line coach.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was like, wait, he's the D-line coach? And people are like, I don't know about that.
And 2 short years later, the sky's falling because he left.
Well, that's my point there. So, so I would start there. I also raised this question to the board. Obviously, whatever people thought about the job that was done this past fall matters, and how the secondary played. And if you think, okay, they didn't maximize as much as I hope they would in certain areas, I think that thought's out there. But I asked our board, I said, maybe I'm dumb, and it's possible that's true, but wouldn't it be the case if John Butler had been hired for this position last off season, and you just looked at his resume, that people would be like really, really fired up and like, man, Rhule nailed it? Because I mean, you're talking about a guy with a 2 to 3 decade resume, and his time with Buffalo, I was just looking through their stats again from 2017 to 23. They're basically tops in all these passing defensive categories and holding teams down and everything. So it's just a matter of perspective. I mean, people would have been pretty fired up in June if Nebraska had to make a DC move and the guy with John Butler's resume were hired. They just would have. It would be. I can't think otherwise, knowing this fan base the way I do and how they react to certain things. So I think they're always going to play pretty good defense with Matt Rhule. I'm not blind in my faith about it, but he has a good track record with it. So I've always kind of trusted that he will make some savvy decisions there. As he has said with the D-line coach, for example, I've had 5 D-line coaches and we've had good defensive lines, so and from what I know about Braden, he's very well thought of in that Chiefs organization too. He wouldn't have been around there as long otherwise. So I wasn't surprised by the moves, and I don't mind the moves at first glance.
BC, with how much of do you think snow or kind of what can happen behind the scenes with the analyst role, like in its totality, matters big picture wise?
With Phil Snow, I think that should give a little piece too, that you have someone who it just feels like is a great sounding board for Rhule. They have such an interesting relationship. I was watching an interview Snow did, which was like a half hour on that. It was that podcast. There's a show in Texas that some of the guys on Rhule's staff go. I think you guys know, 365 Sports or something. And he goes on there and was talking about like how they interacted. And Rhule and Snow, as he was putting it, just have this relationship where, I mean, they can really go at each other and you know, take their critiques and even if they're tough critiques, and understand each other. And I think they just feed off each other in a really positive way. Otherwise, obviously, he wouldn't have been around Rhule at all the stops they've made. So I just think having him around is a huge deal and adds confidence probably to, like, okay, I feel like John can do a good job as the DC. This is Rhule talking, but I've got someone that's been around me for as long as that, you know, 2 decades, and I just know that he's going to be able to be, you know, just a good in-between guy there. And I'm not saying he's going to try to get in the middle of things, but I just think it's nice to have that wisdom in the room is basically what I'd say.
Yeah, so I imagine it kind of something like, you know, because Coach Butler's not going to have, you know, Daquan Jones or Ed Oliver or, you know, Von Miller, you know, up front, right? Or even like Milano or somebody behind it at the second level. I think Terrence Edmonds was there. When you're playing secondaries behind that. So a lot of times in the NFL, what happens is, listen, if your 3-tech is supposed to do something, you know your 3-tech is going to do it, or, you know, your nose is going to do it. So it's a little easier you can scheme on the back end, right? Where I think Snow helps Butler is get back familiar with when things aren't perfect, we can still do this, right? Like that's kind of why I like the whole sounding board, because in the NFL, a lot of it is predicated on every single person not just doing their job, but excelling at it, right? That doesn't always happen at the collegiate level. So how do you combine being really, really bright and understanding schemes with allowing yourself to coach with margin for error? That's where
a great point.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That, like,
yeah,
that's what I think. I'm glad you like that point, B, because I didn't know how to say it.
No, you said it very well, because it actually fits with what John Butler himself said in an interview like a month ago, and I think he was pretty candid that the phrase he used was readjust your eyes. Like Matt Rhule would tell him, you got to readjust your eyes a little bit, and he was speaking about going from coaching like a 32-year-old, the quote was Micah Hyde, to 18-year-old Caleb Benning. You know what I mean? Like you've got a guy who's in a different learning stage of like everything they process with the game. Like obviously 10 years from now, I hope Caleb's playing in the NFL and think of the things he would know then compared to now as a player, even as smart as he is about the game. It's with all those guys, it's like, I can understand where if you've been in the NFL for 10 years, that first fall back on campus, you maybe have like a certain expectation level, like, oh no, that's supposed to go like that. Why didn't that happen exactly like that? And you got to kind of, you be able to adjust the way you process that as a coach and the way then you teach from that. And that connects really, you said it in a way I hadn't thought about as much with Phil Snow, but that makes a lot of sense to me, putting those two thoughts together.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, as we look at the moves that Rhule's made, whether it's on the offensive staff, defensive staff, as this whole thing has come together, and if you had to give it a grade, I know putting you on the spot here a little bit, but if you had to give a grade for how the coaching staff ended up filling out, where would you land?
Oh, man, that's hard. I'd give it a high B at least, because to me the biggest thing was Holgorsen. If I were to simplify it, in my brain, I'll go back to what I said to the first question. I always expect that Rhule's teams are going to play pretty good defense. Now, these hires matter in a big way. Like, can you go from good to being great? Like, can you be that, like, game-changing? Can you be a defense that takes it away and just wins game and doesn't just hold serve, get off the field, but you actually impact it by being plus in points and all that stuff? We'll see. But I've always, if we were just to pull some numbers from the sky, I feel like to be great, Nebraska needs to have not only like a top 20 type of defense in various stats, but I think they need to make that jump and be dynamic on offense where you're top, let's just say 35, top 40 or something. And again, I'm just picking numbers from the sky, but my point is offense needs to go from some of these stats we look at, and it's not all about stats, but when you put enough of them together, you say, okay, they're like a 75th or 80th ranked offense or something like that. And some of this stuff, they need to get way higher in that upper middle at least to go with that defense. And so when Holgorsen came in, and I just felt like there's more juice there. There's more rhythm to what they're doing. You started to see some things open up in the run game that weren't there previously. It had me optimistic for what could be if they kept him. And so on that Monday, that was crazy where, a bunch of guys were in the portal the first day after the season or were planning to go in the portal, and Tony White was leaving. To me, the thing that honestly tipped the scale the whole other way was just the official announcement that Holgorsen was coming back. And I'm not trying to be a homer about that or anything, but that was the biggest thing to me that needed to happen in early December, and it did. So that's why my grade would be like a high B+. Long answer, long.
Hey, so B, let me ask you something. If you just knew, if you're looking around and you're looking for, how tough the Big Ten Conference is in terms of assistant coaches. If you knew that Nebraska had Snow, Butler, and Holgorsen in any other year, how do you think we would respond? No, I always like perspective, right?
No, that's why I go back to what I said. If Damon, if John Butler, let's say Tony White had left after the first year, like seemed possible, and John Butler, who remember was like, if at least the narrative was sort of in a standoff to maybe be the defensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, right? Like he was like at least in that conversation, and they had one of the better scoring defenses, pass defenses, all that stuff when the time he'd been there. And it's like, okay, he didn't get the Bills job. That's the guy Nebraska just hired as a DC. People, I'm telling you, like in the offseason of 24, had it been before the season, would be like, man, that's a great hire. Like, oh boy, did you see where they went and who they got? They could have been the DC at the Bills. That would have been like the talk about that hire. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have fair critiques and say, like, I was hoping for a little more consistency at times from the secondary this past year with some of the veterans they had and this and that. Certain guys I wish they would have got a little more out of. That's all fair. This is a big boy business, so all those takes are fine. And John Butler's got to go prove it now. There's going to be big expectations, and he knows that. It's a weighty job. And so all that stuff. But, yeah, you put those names together, and I like that. I mean, it's a bunch of guys who have, like, all of them have 2, 3, sometimes 4 decades of coaching experience at a high level. And they're
football IQ peers. Like, I can't tell you how important I think that is.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I like the question because, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the D-line will take a step back. John Butler's got to prove himself. So, it's one of those that's hard to say. But I feel fine about it where it is right now with the staff hires. There was nothing that – and I always think it's a fool's errand to get too hot takey anyway. That then he must be coming on as like an analyst or an assistant D-line coach because he didn't really have a resume at the time. And then 2 years later, people are like, can't lose this guy. So let's see if Braden can come in and be that same type of guy, like in a year where people are like, oh man, we pay him whatever you got to pay him. You got to keep him. He's got that opportunity now to be that too.
BC, are you, and maybe you're not, I don't know. It is kind of dog-eat-dog world, but are you surprised Knighton so openly tried to pillage Nebraska's D-line?
Yeah.
I am too. I really am.
Yep.
And if you ask Coach Rhule, he would say he isn't, just because he expects it to go that way. I'm kind of shaking my head a little bit.
I am too. I'm surprised it hasn't been talked about more, actually. But I mean, I don't know what, like in baseball, there's all these hidden rules and you can't do this and can't do that. I don't know if there's a line stepped over in the portal anymore. There are no rules. That's probably the truth.
I don't think they exist anymore.
Yeah, this is the Wild West, and so there it is. So, I mean, you got to get what you can get to survive. Nebraska's going to have to do the same thing. I think whatever you think about it, if you're in Nebraska's inside their walls, like when someone sees something they don't like, but they kind of in a movie have that determined nod of their head, like, okay, I see how you do. You do like your Denzel nod, like, all right. And you're like, okay, that's how this is. So you got to go do your own stuff there. And I mean, getting Phil Simpson back is huge, I think, because if you talk about like those Miami guys,
we kind of bemoaned that departure quietly, didn't we?
Oh yeah. I thought it was big. And I mean, in this day and age, to have a guy, I'm not saying every Miami guy just stays put because one coach is here, but he has such a great relationship with players. Like I was talking to Cortez Mills this week for a story on Cortez, and I just happened to bring him up, Phil, because it was going to come out that he was going to be the guy. And he talked about how much Phil Simpson meant to him and his mom and how they just trust him with anything. I think he has that relationship with a lot of guys. I think Jamar Mosey has that relationship with a lot of guys. And I think that's a sneaky storyline in this portal era, too, in the next few weeks is as much as we talk about with players that are coming out of high school, pick the school, not necessarily the coach. I do think in a bunch of these portal situations, it can really matter if you have a tie into a coach that went back 2 or 3 years ago and a guy really liked that guy and he feels like, okay, I have some familiarity with like a Jamar Mosey or a Phil Simpson that I can get started there and I at least have that, or I know this player because I played against him or with him in high school. I would not undersell that at all over the next couple of weeks when you see names pop up in the portal. When you see those names or that could be options, I'd look into the history and be like, okay, do they have a connection here or there? Because I think that can ultimately matter.
BC, do you think there's any other staff movement left this offseason?
What'd you say?
Do you think there's any other staff movement left to happen this offseason for Nebraska?
I don't know. I'm not gonna close the door on anything. There's too much that could change by the day, it feels like. And, I think, like, Rhule did a good job to get this settled when he did with the hires that were announced the other day. And then I think you proceed as best you can to get some additions from the portal and you get ready for this bowl game. I do think it's a big deal to go win this thing and get a winning season. And I think all that stuff matters going into 2025. So I think you hopefully can get a lot of attention focused on that with the guys that are here in the next week. But I'm not going to say that it's just over and there's nothing else going to change, because I've thought that before, and then something happens and there's always a chain reaction with some coach left somewhere else and it causes this to happen. So you never know.
BC, how much of you is excited about just seeing some fresh faces at the bowl game?
Yeah, that's a cool part of it. Like I'm eager to watch some younger guys probably get some more opportunities. I'm one of those who was a defender of veterans getting their time in like Big Ten games, and that it's not easy to just like a video game to insert this guy in place of this guy who's played for 4 years and all that. But now's the time. I mean, now's the time to really let some guys get a sprint going in an atmosphere like this, playing a game like this. And you want to finish 24 off right, but it is very much a building block in the next season and those guys. And I think what's cool about it is the guys who have been around the program a long time, and even though it was a big deal to those seniors to get this bowl game, if you hear them talk throughout the year, most of them will speak on how much it means to them to leave a foundation for the young guys and how they want to come back in 2 or 3 years and see this program really flourishing. And so I don't think a lot of those guys who are veterans who are even in their last game are going to balk at the fact that maybe this young guy got some reps here or there, because they know how important that is going forward, and they want to see that too. So there are older guys I'd love to see like have a moment like Ramir, like I'd love to see that in this game at the Pinstripe Bowl. But, we'll see if some storyline like that can pop. That'd be fun.
BC, obviously transfer portal, also a big storyline going on right now. I'm going to take the defensive line out of it because just from a number standpoint, I assume that's a place that you'd hope Nebraska focuses on. Is there another spot that you're like, hey, I'd really like to see them, we'll use the term bolster here because Dion loves it so much. Is there a place you'd like to see them bolster their unit a little bit?
You're right. D-line is my main focus, but I think there's some wide receiver ads, and that's been pretty well documented. Some guys that they're after there, and with the Kel Shorts as the coach there, you got to let him maybe cook a little bit and see if there's a couple that he thinks could really add a dynamic to what they already have and sort of fits the puzzle pieces together well. So that's a spot I look at. Linebacker, they've definitely shown some interest in adding to at least give more depth there. Like I know Omar Graham, for Florida State's a guy that was going to come in, and Phoenix Jackson from Fresno State. So I would say backer, the front seven, basically wide receiver really popped in my head first. And then, quarterback, you need to feel like you've got whatever numbers you got to find that or sort of right combination that you feel like you have at least a steady 1-2 there, which is not going to be easy for schools to do in this day and age, to feel really good about their 1-2 at QB. But Nebraska has to find a way to get in that place. That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate it as always. Great stuff.
Thanks, B.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker247.
You vibing with me about the margin for error, coaching with a guy that understands how to coach with a margin for error?
100%.
Because I think there is a little bit of that playing perfect thing.
I think that's, and this is going to sound snarky, I don't mean it that way at all. That's one of the smarter things I've heard you say, like in a while. Like I thought that was really on point. And I mean that sincerely. Like I thought it was really well said and really well put. And I think it's really true. I think I had never put it in those words, what we were seeing this year. And I go, oh, like when you talk about with the defensive backs and the defensive line, and you go, oh, they had zero margin for error.
Yeah.
They had to do it exactly perfectly, or we saw them get gashed over the top. Yep. And you said it, you put it succinctly in a way that like my mind had just not wrapped around it.
I just get the sense that I think that matters. And
especially with college kids.
And you know what it allows Rhule to do?
What's that?
He can put his fingerprint all over it because he knows those guys.
Yeah. And that matters.
I can't understand. There's just something about that. Because you already have the knowledge. You already get the knowledge. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
But knowledge is only cool if you can get the other guys to know it too.
Yeah, if you can communicate it in a way that it matters.
I think that's going to matter. They'll play freer.
That's playing freer is the thing that I think kept them from being a better defense last year. We've got Kevin Sjuts coming up next. Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DBM Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We're joined now by Kevin Sjuts from 1011 News in Lincoln. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning. We've got a dusting of snow here in Lincoln, and my puppy right now is out in the backyard and loving every second of it.
Wait. What kind of dog?
Well, we got a St. Bernard Poodle mix. He's about, 7 months old now.
What the?
And
you got a
Bernedoodle?
Little
Guy's already. What?
You got a Bernedoodle? Yeah.
Oh yeah. And this dude is awesome. He doesn't lack energy, and right now he's going nuts. So if I'm a little distracted, I'm just watching him go absolutely crazy. He's already. We weighed him this week. He's pushing about 74 pounds right now.
Lord have mercy.
What's the name?
Rocky.
Oh, good name for a dog. That's a good dog name.
Oh, gosh. Here we go. There's the dog voice. I'm sitting next to maybe arguably the biggest dog lover I've ever met.
It's true. I turn into a totally different person around dogs. Like, if the person that DB wants him to be, like, nice and friendly, like, that's how I am around dogs.
Oh, totally relate to that. Sometimes you'll be in the worst mood. You're working in the garage or out in the front yard, and you just see, like, a lovable pup come walking down the street, and instantly you're on your knee, like, oh, good boy, come, like, it is crazy how dogs can flip our brains instantly.
All right. So, Kevin, are you at least entertaining the idea of having to fly somewhere from New York based on how volleyball goes?
Yeah, that's a tough turn. The challenge with this whole thing is it's good for volleyball because they extended the NCAA volleyball Final Four a few years ago, and the championship is now on Sunday. The whole primary driving factor was to get it on network TV. It's broadcast on ABC, so that's going to be on Sunday, the 22nd, and then Nebraska football. So I might be wrong on my dates, but Nebraska football then plays, Saturday of the same week. So for anybody doing the double coverage from Louisville to New York stretch and traveling to New York City around, in between Christmas and New York City is not exactly easy.
Yeah. Speaking of volleyball, I mean, I know obviously with you in Lincoln, Nebraska gets all the run. Creighton also in the Sweet 16 as well. And let's not forget about Omaha and Bellevue's own Bellevue Bruins, national runners-up in the NAI national tournament as well. It's good to play volleyball in the state of Nebraska.
Absolutely. And awesome that you just shouted out Bellevue. Epic match in the NAIA championship last
Tough
night.
Loss.
They lost
Tough loss.
Indiana. Oh, my goodness. Set 5 was unreal. And in order to get to the championship round for Bellevue, they knocked out on the way, I believe it was in the quarterfinals, they knocked out Concordia, which is just down the road here in Seward, and they had a historic season as well. So, Ravi, appreciate you giving the love to teams across Nebraska in volleyball. Wayne State had a fantastic year. Criminally was left out of the Division II tournament, and then UNK was ranked in the top 10 nearly the entire season. They unfortunately were upset in the first round of the D2 tournament.
Hey, quick rundown here, Kev. You got Penn State, Marquette, Texas, Creighton, Wisconsin, A&M, Dayton, Nebraska. Obviously, that's one half. But then you go Louisville, Purdue, Florida, Stanford, Missouri, Kentucky, Oregon, Pitt. Which side would you rather be on?
Oh, I don't want to be on Louisville's side. I still like
because you're at the Yum Center, or just because it's Louisville?
Because Louisville's region is very tough, and they almost lost last round to Northern Iowa. In fact, you and I had match point 3, 4, 5 times, and we've heard Coach Cook talk about how when Omaha is hosting the Final Four, how difficult that season is because there is just an enormous amount of pressure that these players feel throughout the entire year. There have been times Nebraska has hosted the Final Four and the Huskers don't make it. And so I'm wondering if that's maybe what's happening with Louisville. And the other thing working against the Cardinals right now is, they got Stanford in the regional, and Stanford enters the tournament about as hot as anybody in the country. So I just want to stay away from that side. And I like where Nebraska sits. They can beat Dayton. They can beat Wisconsin, and if they get those 2 wins here on Friday and Sunday, they're headed to Louisville for the Final Four. And I've said all
I think
season,
A&M is going to be tricky for Wisconsin, though.
I can see that. I can see. I guess I shouldn't
just with their pace, like offensively, because that's what Nebraska did to them, and it dealt them fits.
Yeah, that's a great point. Look at you talking volleyball, TV. You know what you're talking about. This is great.
I like sports.
This is great. That's a great take. And talk about pressure. Maybe Wisconsin's feeling it. They've struggled. They've been up and down. Wisconsin has a freshman setter. You never know how they're going to play, when the season is on the line. So that's a good call. That's probably, for me, the better of the two regional semifinal matches at the Devaney Center on Friday. I've said all year long, Nebraska to me just looks like a national championship team. The way they played last week in the first and second rounds, you have to walk away from the Devaney Center going, yep, they're winning it, because they looked so unbeatable.
Kevin, going from everything going on in the college athletics world, it's been a super busy time in high school as well. I don't think we've talked to you since the state football championships wrapped up, and all of a sudden we're fast and furious into basketball season as well. What's keeping you busy on the high school scene this week?
Well, we've got high school basketball. We've already had some great, opening Friday was unbelievable for us here in Lincoln. Standing Bear girls, by the way, won their first ever varsity game on Friday on a buzzer beater by a freshman, and it was her first ever made field goal in a varsity game. That's like storybook epic stuff that, start writing the book of Standing Bear basketball now, and that's going to be the lead chapter. Pretty amazing stuff there. But a lot of high school basketball, trying to figure out who's really at the top of the list in terms of Lincoln prep basketball. Early indications say it's going to have to be either Lincoln Southeast or possibly Lincoln North Star. They've got some nice young talent at North Star. And then Lincoln Lutheran right now is ranked number 1 in Class C1.
Death taxes in Lincoln Lutheran?
Lincoln Lutheran Athletics, you pick a season, they've got a team that's probably pretty good.
Kevin, we appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. And I put this out on Twitter, but just want to make sure you hear it as well. Our listeners, aka me, need a picture of Rocky in the snow whenever you get a chance. So,
I got you. He's still out there. He's just he's got the zoomies, and it hasn't stopped this whole time.
Oh, I have 2 Frenchies. I can tell you all about zoomies. Goodness gracious.
I love it. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Just make sure they stay away from the furniture, right?
Yes. I know where they've been. Appreciate it, Kevin.
Appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Be well and stay warm.
We're doing our best out here. It's a little chilly out today.
I didn't spend much. I didn't spend any time.
Although I thought we were supposed to get some snow, we didn't.
Yeah, what happened? Alexa told me between 2 and 5.
Yeah, I thought we might have a little dusting for the commute, but we're okay.
Fudge.
You wanted a dusting?
I don't know. I kind of like, you know me, I'm all 4 seasons.
You like weather.
I do.
You're a big weather guy. Big weather guy, big volleyball guy.
I do like volleyball.
I know.
I like volleyball quite a bit.
I think people are taken aback sometimes when, you just roll into something that, really you have no business to have the depth of knowledge that you do on something.
Wow.
I think, no, I mean, to be fair.
Dude said I finally said something smart. And then that I have no business. That's,
no,
okay.
I mean, okay, so it makes sense, Nebraska, Creighton, some of these other things, right? But then you're like, oh, man, yeah, Texas A&M's pace offensively could be a real problem for Wisconsin. It's like, why do you know that?
I don't.
Why do you, that's, good for you, but damn.
You're incredible.
I'm just sitting here, and one of these days we're going to be talking Big Ten wrestling, and you're just going to be rolling through Illinois' lineup, and I'll be like, man, why do you know that?
Because I like wrestling.
I understand that, but I think you have a problem a little bit.
By the way,
just a little bit.
I would kind of like to talk to.
You want to talk to Mark Manning again,
or maybe Antrell Taylor, just because he's from here.
I liked Mark. Mark was good, coach.
He's great. He's a great idiot.
He was fun to talk to.
Patriots got a big win last night over Papiola Vista South.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about them. Miller North is the basketball school in Miller now. Don't you know?
Did you see that last week against Bell West?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, my bad.
I don't want to talk about it.
My bad.
We're a basketball school, DB.
I got you.
We'll be back. Somebody in the chat, Tanner, I believe, asked a question. He's wrong, so I have to tell him why. That's DB. I'm Ravi. Little more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. We are back, wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. If you're trying to lose weight, It can be tough, especially over the holidays, but you don't have to do it alone. Midland's Family Urgent Care offers affordable weight loss medications designed to work with your body and help you see results. Take advantage of their special holiday pricing. Tirzepatide for just $5.99 for the first 3 months, or semaglutide for $3.49 for the first 3 months. Both treatments are backed by science and provide long-term results. Call 402-679-0943 today and get started on your weight loss journey with Midland's Family Urgent Care. DB.
Yeah, buddy.
Our guy Tanner might need some urgent care after his comment in the stream. I appreciate him listening. I appreciate his thoughts.
What's the matter with Tanner?
But Tanner.
Oh, boy, here we go.
And I have to correct him.
You're picking another fight again.
I'm not picking a fight. I'm trying to educate, DB.
Okay.
I'm not like you. I'm not an educator at heart, but I do feel the need.
Wow.
I do feel the need to correct people when they're wrong. Because he mentioned earlier, hey, well, he's like, I'm fine with the coaching talk for today. All the hires came in. But he's like, I really want to talk transfer portal. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. I got bad news, bud. That's not correct. It's just not.
Okay.
Jimmies and Joes matter. Nobody's going to pretend like they don't. Okay. The X's and the O's are what make an enormous, enormous difference. How much have we talked this year about teams not living up to their talent, not living up to their potential? And I'm not going to be anecdotal here. Our guy, our favorite analytical guy, Adam McClintock, hit me with some stats earlier this week, unrelated, but they apply here. Unrelated. The conversation was unrelated. He asked me what I thought about the SEC versus the Big Ten in terms of who I thought had a better year. And he's looking at this from pure numbers, from a numbers objective, right?
Okay.
I said, I would say the SEC probably had a slightly better year because this was coming off of my Ponzi scheme rant. and I was like, I think they probably had a slightly better year than the Big Ten, but I think what the perception of them is totally out of whack for what they actually are. And he goes, it was about dead even. The talent in the SEC is objectively better. The coaching in the Big Ten is so good that it totally makes up the gap. That's what the analytics tell you.
I believe it.
The analytics tell, and people are going to be like, oh, look at the national championships. Let's look at the national championships, guys. Let's look at them. I don't just want to do Michigan last year, right? Because that's all Big Ten. They finally got one, right? Let's really look at what the SEC is. It's two teams. This whole run we've been talking about, you want to go all the way back, basically almost 15 years at this point. It's Alabama heavily, and then recently Georgia. You have one LSU freak year in there. I don't know that anybody's betting on Ed Orgeron again. You have this freak occurrence of events and Joe Burrow being generational that season. But otherwise, you're literally talking about Alabama for 15 years and Georgia recently. That's it. That's the prowess of the SEC. That's the whole thing. Whereas, and listen, I get that they've got more titles in the Big Ten. That's fine. But if you want to go analytically top to bottom of the conference, SEC, better talent. Big Ten, the coaching totally makes up the difference. Year in and year out, that's what the analytics tell you.
Excuse me. But on just a smaller scale, when's the last time we felt like Nebraska's wins and losses was about talent? I always ask this.
Some people do, and they're wrong. In most cases, they're wrong. Like when they lose to Ohio State, it's about talent. Usually.
Was it?
It wasn't this year.
Okay.
But usually when they lose to Ohio State, it's like.
But if we had one more better player, then we probably would have cut. We wouldn't have blown the coverage.
No, that's not it. Right? This year
we would have been able to run with Jeremiah Smith.
Nope. This year it wasn't about talent.
Okay.
But I mean, we did this.
Because I know. Because you always need better
right,
players.
100%. It's not that the players don't matter, but Iowa's a great example of this. Minnesota's a great example of this. Northwestern had been a great example of this. I did this for years at the old place where I would go, hey, show me the team in the Big Ten West that out-recruits Nebraska. And they didn't exist save for 2 years. In the entire existence of the Big Ten West, Nebraska got out-recruited by a Big Ten West opponent twice, once by Iowa and once by Wisconsin. Every other year, Nebraska out-recruited every other team in the Big Ten West. How many times did Nebraska win the Big Ten West? 0 times. By the time it stopped being legends and leaders, Nebraska won 0 Big Ten West titles while out-recruiting their opponents every single year. Did the record ever reflect that? So what's left for that to matter? Is it coaching?
Probably.
It might be coaching. Okay, that's all. That's all I had. Just
Wow.
it's just objectively not true.
I'm just over having it, even though I do want better players sometimes.
Everybody wants better players. That's everybody wants better players. Matt Rhule wants better players. You think he's ever going to look at his roster and be like, we're not good enough to win? No. Does he still want better players? Yeah. Everybody wants better players. That's why there's 8 billion recruiting sites.
If all we complained about was coaching.
Yep.
Well, there were a couple players.
Mostly, though.
Yeah.
I mean, do we not remember all this Marcus Satterfield?
Yeah.
Do we not remember? Our wide receivers are good. We got Dylan Raiola. We got our offensive line. Must be Marcus Satterfield's fault. Well, do we just need to go get a better quarterback?
No, you're exactly right.
Thank you, Marcus. Do we need to go get better receivers? That's a good pull, Shane. Do we need, what's the problem? All of a sudden, so did anybody in the running back room change between when Marcus Satterfield was the head coach, when Dana Holgorsen was the head, or offensive coordinator when Dana Holgorsen was the head? It was the same guys in the room, right?
No.
Like Emmett Johnson was there prior to that, right? Dante Dowdell that's the same guy from earlier in the year that we're like, oh, Dante Dowdell can't run dead.
Eric said you may be right this time.
Yeah.
Megan, our offensive trouble this year is proof that Tanner's not accurate. Are people riding with Ravi?
Let's go.
See?
Everybody gets a win every once in a while.
That's what my guy.
That sounds like a new segment.
Dad always said.
Riding with Ravi.
Let's go.
Yeah, do I sound like Meat Dad now?
Yeah. Have you ever watch him on?
No.
He's great.
How many times do I gotta tell you I'm not listening to that fool?
That's Southern Vibin'.
Oh, is that a different guy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't watch. Let's go, baby.
That's Southern Vibin'.
That's not Meat Dad?
No.
Those are different people?
Meat Dad is the guy that taught me how to cut meat.
I don't cook, so why would I watch cooking TikTok?
He doesn't really cook. Well, he does cook sometimes.
I mean, except for the ones that look like me that I can't understand what they're saying. I'd try not to watch cooking TikTok.
You did understand a couple of the words.
Because they're just food words. It's like, I don't speak Spanish either, but if somebody busts out with like a quesadilla, I'm going to understand them.
Is quesadilla Spanish?
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
You know a lot of English words that give you like the double L and it's pronounced like a yeah?
I thought it was Mexican.
You know people in Mexico speak Spanish, right?
Yes.
Absolute free. So if it's Mexican.
I'm talking about the food, not the word.
Right, but if somebody is speaking Spanish.
So is that what they always call it? Is that what they always call it?
Quesadilla is a Spanish word. It's Spanish.
Oh, okay.
That's how. Like, I know what carne asada is. That's Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. You know what I mean? It's like I know what biryani is, but I don't speak
So can I ask a question?
Indian, as you put it. As long as it's not about anybody in a cupboard, Shano.
Oh, gosh.
So it's con queso, chili con queso.
That's Spanish as well.
Okay.
That is.
Okay, so is that a good question? Better than yesterday?
Yeah, it was. Well, yesterday wasn't a question so much as a statement, but yes. Pico de gallo, also Spanish.
That's a penny drop of the
You know? It's food. It's food time.
I don't know. Hey, Josh asked a question.
What do we got? What do we got?
Did you guys defend Satterfield and talk about being more talented this season? Maybe I'm misremembering. No, I'm not speaking for you. Josh is clearly misremembering. I said it's a fine line whether the Satterfield. This is me. I don't know about what. God, is he even listening to the same show? No. What my thing about Satterfield was, at some point, players have to make plays.
Yeah.
And I never at any point said the Satterfield thing was going to work. I said you can't have a disconnect between when a quarterback plays well, it's in spite of, and if he doesn't play well, it's his fault.
Yeah, it's because of.
So I don't know what Josh is asking me. Josh may be talking to you, but he said you guys, so I'm going to answer for me.
He might
It's
be.
a terrible job of listening, Josh.
I will say maybe, and I'm going to try and give him the benefit of the doubt here.
The defend Satterfield thing, the generalizations over an explanation drive me up the wall. Because if somebody says anything to the contrary of what somebody believes, it doesn't mean you're necessarily defending. You could be giving another point of view or another way to receive the information.
And
doesn't mean you're defending.
also,
that is juvenile.
Lance, you're also wrong. He says Ravi was a big Sat fan.
Lance is just trolling.
Yeah, I know. The issue I had was that I thought there were plays to be made that I don't think you could blame on Sat. That was my issue, right? Like if guys are open and the quarterback doesn't get them the ball, like that's not a concept issue at that point.
The revisionist issue.
Right? That's not a play calling issue at that point. Now, obviously, something connected better with Dana Holgerson and Dylan Raiola than it did with Marcus Satterfield and Dylan Raiola. That's fine. But you can't sit here and tell me that guys weren't open when Marcus Satterfield were calling plays because I saw it. Like go watch those games, see if you can get a hold of an all 22. Guys were open. Obviously, there was some disconnect there, and you can put that on coaching. That's totally fine. But you can't sit here and say that it was all conceptual and all play calling because there were guys open and the plays weren't made. Now, I will say, I don't know if it was Joe, but or whoever the original question was, I can understand getting confused between talent and players making plays. Right, I can understand if you get that confused a little bit.
You could get into that discussion.
I think what we were saying, at least what I was saying, was the talent's there for the guys to make plays. If I didn't think the talent was there, I wouldn't talk about players making plays because they're not capable of it.
Who didn't they have enough talent to beat this year?
Nobody. The answer should be Ohio State, but we saw they were even, basically. I mean,
they played it that way.
They certainly did. That's UB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're talking some national college basketball with Isaac Trotter coming up next. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by Isaac Trotter. He is the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports. Isaac, how are you this morning?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good morning, Isaac. Good morning.
Isaac, let's get started here in a place that I think is interesting. They happened to play last night, won a game against Michigan. How do you feel about the John Calipari experience at Arkansas so far?
Well, it's been a roller coaster, that's for sure. I think a lot of people have some questions about what Arkansas is going to be this year. I think defensively for them, they have a really high ceiling. And then offensively, it's just like, how much have we adapted to the new age of college basketball where it's floor spacing, it's shooting threes, it's getting shots at the rim, it's limiting those non-rim twos. So far, Arkansas hasn't really done that. Their three-point rate has not been super high at times this year, but last night I think was a little bit of a step in the right direction. You know, that they shot 23 threes. They were getting to the rim a ton. You saw some defensive moments from them late in that game. We saw a different version of DJ Wagner, a guy who John Calipari really invested into a ton. So it's a fascinating dynamic here with this Arkansas team. I think they have as much talent as a lot of teams in the country, but they've just been very inconsistent so far. And this new group is starting to get healthy. We're seeing Jonas Adu start to play a little bit more. And Cal, to his credit, he started to adjust some things a little bit with his rotation. So I think the arrow is definitely pointing up, but I think a lot of people still have some questions about what Arkansas is going to be this year in a loaded SEC.
So what do you think it is? I'm going to go to Tennessee last night, which only played with 8 scholarship guys, by the way, which is crazy. What do you think it is about the difference this year, allowing like Ziegler and those guys to play with much more pace than they did a year ago? Not nearly as deliberate on offense, which seems to kind of be playing to their strengths.
No, that's a great point. You know, I think the thing that Tennessee's done a good job of is they just have added way more skill. Last year, I think there were times where it was Dalton Connect. You really trusted him. And there was a couple other, like, decent guys. But, you know, especially in that front court, I wouldn't say it was the most skilled front court at times, especially when they were playing like a Toby Awaka at the 5. This year, I think they've done a good job of, like, getting an Igor Milicic out of the portal. That 4 is maybe the hardest position to find right now in college basketball recruiting and roster building. And he could pass, he can dribble, he can shoot, he can rebound, he can block shots, he can guard down the perimeter. That adds a different layer to your offense. So when your 4 can be mobile, they even move him to the 5 at times, and then they go with 4 guards with Kai Ziegler, Jemai Meshack, Chaz Lanier, Jordan Gainey. Like, they have another big Kate Phillips who can really run the floor. Like, you're starting to see more skilled size, and Tennessee has pivoted to like, hey, we can play 4 guards with a small ball 5 who can really shoot it a little bit and cause some problems. It helps when you have 2 absolutely elite defenders too, right? Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak, those guys, like, yeah, they might be 6'4" and 5'9", but like they are complete bulldogs defensively, and they rebound as well as for guards. So Tennessee's a really interesting team because they really haven't played anybody that's awesome yet. That'll change this week when they play Illinois. But they just look like a well-rounded machine. And for the second year in a row, after getting Dalton Connect, they go get Chaz Levere, and he's just a flamethrower too.
Isaac, I know DB wants to talk about Illinois, but I do want to follow up on Tennessee here for a second. Like, does Rick Barnes get enough credit for the job he's done there?
He sure gets a lot of hate. I know that.
I would say he was super maligned at Texas. I know he's been somewhat maligned at Tennessee as well, but the dude wins a lot of basketball games pretty convincingly for a guy that I don't know that everybody thinks is all that good.
No, I think a lot of people had all of these assumptions about him as like, oh, he can't really get past that second weekend. And it's amazing how like the NCAA tournament is the most random event in sports. You cannot find something more random. But the moment that he gets the Elite Eight, suddenly, oh, Rick Barnes is a good coach.
Everything's okay.
Super similar to the things that happened with Purdue. Like, oh, Matt Painter's, he's a good coach now that he made it all the way to the national championship game. It's just not fair at times. So I think he has done a phenomenal job. And I think it illustrated last night. Jim Larrañaga's on the sideline last night for Miami. We have some real questions about, hey, where are they going? He's one of the elder statesmen in college basketball. His team looks a little bit like behind the times. Tennessee has adapted. They've evolved offensively. They take more threes than they've been taking before. They're still terrific defensively. They have an identity in the portal. They find the right guys in roster building. Like, Rick Barnes deserves a ton of credit for how he's changed to adapt to the college game. And this is 4 years in a row where Tennessee is top 10 on KenPom. Like, I think they're a legit national title contender. And for Barnes, like, he's really proven that he's one of the elite coaches in the sport.
Ravi threw me a softball just because I don't love Illinois as a program. I thought this year this was going to be a much better team than the national experts thought, and primarily it's because they got guys like Trey White, right? Really good players that kind of fly under the radar, and it's like you talk about everybody else in the conference, but man, I watched this Illinois team, and obviously it goes without saying when they're shooting it well, they're a much different team. But do you think this team is better than they look on paper, or do you like them from the off the hoof?
Well, yeah, I've had a hard time with Illinois this year. I think they're one of those teams where I think their best 40 minutes is better than any 40 minutes that any Big Ten team will play this year.
Completely agree.
They have a gear that they can get to offensively with Kasparis Yakishonis and Tommy Avicic inside that is just special. And I think Yakishonis could potentially end up being the number 3 pick in the draft. But they're also really young. And they're going to make mistakes, and it's going to be late in the Northwestern game, and they're going to take weird shots and have bad possessions and blow layups. And like, it just feels like one of those groups where it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. But when you get to March and you have this collection of talent, that can take you a long way. And I think a lot of teams feel that Illinois has the highest ceiling of any team in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten's wide open this year. But I don't think they're going to win the league. I think they're the most talented team. I just have a feeling that they're going to end up losing a couple of those nip and tuck games where those old teams in Big Ten play can like find a way to grind them out in late game situations. I think Illinois is going to find its way on the wrong end of it, and they're going to probably end up as like a 6th seed and be a terrifying team in March because the talent that they have compared to some of these others is just ridiculous. I mean, they legitimately have 2 lottery picks and a boatload of other Big Ten talent, and they're big. I think Illinois has the best shooting front court in the country with Avicic and Benham Rickhouse. They haven't necessarily proven it together yet at times, but that shooting that they have from those 2 guys is something that very, very few front courts can rival.
Is KJ shooting close to 50% this year? That can't be sustainable for the way that he plays, is it?
I don't know. He does a really good job of getting to his spots. He loves that little step back 3. And Illinois is interesting because last year's team, it was like, every missed shot, it was like, we got to sprint in transition and try to score a bucket with Terrence Shannon and just flying up and down the floor. This year, it feels like they want to go a little bit slower to get KJ the ball. He really reminds me a little bit of like the Luka Doncic effect with the Mavericks, where it's like, hey, we got to slow it down. We're going to run a ton of pick and rolls with him. He's going to try to get to his step back. So yeah, I don't know if he's going to shoot 45% from three, including 55% in the two Big Ten games this year. But I think Illinois as a whole will start to shoot. I think Ben Humrickhouse is a better shooter than what he's shown. I think you're going to see Will Riley continue to make shots. Kylan Boswell, he's shooting just 22% from three. We know he can shoot better from that after he shot close to 40% in 2 years at Arizona. So, but KJ, I mean, the thing is that everyone's talking about the jumper right now, but I'm telling you, the playmaking is special stuff from that kid.
Isaac, I got to tell myself a little bit here because the way a lot of fans have felt about Rick Barnes, I kind of feel that way about Brad Underwood sometimes. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't totally been sold on him. I'm not a full-on hater, but I kind of sit there and I go, if there's a limiting factor to Illinois, sometimes I think it might be the head coach. Am I wrong? Am I right? What would be the limiting factor if I'm wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the jury is still out for some people in that regard. I think there's a lot of people that look at his in-game adjustments and be a little bit less like they want a little bit more. They want a little bit more in that regard. But I think Brad has done a decent job of changing his team. Like I said, last year was a very transition-heavy team. A few years ago with Kofi Coburn, it's a post-up heavy team. This year, it's a ton of ball screens. So he's a little bit of like just a constant tweaker and changer of offensive personalities of just what his teams look like. They're not necessarily the same every single year. I think that's a good thing. But I think it's fair to have some questions about, hey, like if it's a mid-game adjustment, like are we going to be able to be flexible to find the right rotations? That was a problem against Northwestern. There's been some questions about that so far this year, and it could be a limiting factor. But overall, the dude's done a ton of winning at every spot, and the ability to change and adapt his teams in an era when college basketball is like changing every year, I think is a sign of what he is. I think he's probably a top 3 or 4 coach in the Big Ten. I don't think I would have him number 1 though.
Talk about changing in college basketball. How about the style of play if we stay in the Big Ten with Michigan, with the way that Golden and Wolf can play off of each other and use like Wolf as like he's like a point center sometimes. And he's a handful. Who needs to play well in addition to, if you assume Golden and Wolf are going to do that? Is it Gale Jr. or is it somebody else?
I think it's Gale, because you're right. That big on big pick and roll that Wolf and Golden are doing right now, like it's unstoppable. And I think Gale is really that last guy that can really bring it together, because the rim pressure that he brings, he's a terrific cutter. I think we're probably 0.5 seconds away from having a very different conversation about Michigan if Gale has a little bit more separation on that back cut in the closing seconds last night, where he's able to.
And he stepped out of bounds too on the 1-2. He can turn the corner in a hurry.
He really can, and you just see him, like, he puts a defender on his hip, and it's just boom, he is gone. So, and I still have some questions overall about Michigan's perimeter shooting. When they don't have Namari Burnett on the floor, they have lineups where they have no one who made 53s last year, and you can't say that about any other Big Ten team. And they haven't shot a ton of threes so far this season. At times, it's been like a turnover, but they create really good shots. So I think Gale's probably the right answer to that. But they also need a more consistent Trey Donaldson. He has moments where he looks like the best player on the floor. Then he has moments like against Wisconsin where he completely disappears. Then he has moments last night where he's really good when he's on the floor, commits a couple of dumb fouls, and has to sit for a while, and Michigan really misses him. So I think Michigan is really well coached. I think the playmaking that they have is really real, but I feel like some of these guards have to continue to assert themselves as legit, like alpha type of guards. Donaldson wasn't that last year for Auburn. Ohio State, Ravi wasn't necessarily the alpha last year behind Bruce Thornton. If he can elevate into that tier, I think Michigan is probably, maybe the number 1 team in the Big Ten.
We're talking with Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports. Isaac, as I'm looking at some of the top teams in the country, obviously Kansas was here in Omaha last week, and they continued kind of an alarming trend for me, not only in their loss to Creighton, but in their loss to Missouri as well, where their offense seems like a lot of standing around, a lot of dribbling, and a lot of not being sure if Hunter Dickinson really wants to be there. Like, when you watch Kansas, can you nail down what's ailing them right now?
I think their wings are killing them. Like, it's a problem. I think I cannot believe that Diggy Coit, the transfer out of Northern Illinois, is playing as much or more minutes than A.J. Storr, Rylan Griffin, and Zeke Mayo. Like, I can't believe it.
I mean, everybody at Wisconsin could have told you that about A.J. Storr.
His shot
That's
selection
fair, but AJ
stinks.
also in the Big Ten tournament last year had like a game where he goes for 30 points against Northwestern and just completely going off against teams down the stretch. And I'm like, if he just cuts hard at Kansas, he's going to get 12 points a game because with all of the Phil self back cuts and running in transition, all of these things. But you're right. I feel like Kansas right now doesn't even know what they're good at. Like, are we a pick and roll team? Are we an isolation team? Are we going to be a heavy post up team? Like, they just don't really have that feel. And I thought Creighton did a really good job of just packing the paint relentlessly with 4 defenders to force them to shoot jumpers. You know, I think it helped a little bit that Rylan Griffin was out, but even he hasn't looked like himself yet. You know, and they loved him out of the portal. They thought he was going to be a guy that could come in and, you know, make 73s for them this year at a 40% clip. So this is a group that we've seen their ceiling, right? That win over Duke is going to age really well, especially when Dickinson wasn't on the floor for the final 10 minutes. But I think it's fair to have some questions about these wings because this was supposed to be a strength of this roster, and so far it's been a pretty glaring weakness.
Before we get over to the Big East, I want to finish here with the Big Ten with we killed 2 birds with 1 stone as Nebraska's got one coming up with Indiana. And Ravi and I go back and forth on Indiana. Listen, talented team. He's not a big Woodson guy. Nebraska learning to play some offense, can play big, playing good defense. Let me ask you about Indiana first. Who do you think the real Bryson Tucker is going to be if he's going to help Indiana on the perimeter?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Bryson fan. You know, I think there's been times where it's hard to figure out these type of wings that don't shoot it from 3, especially when you have 2 other bigs on the floor that also don't shoot it well from 3. So like the Bryson Tucker, Umar Balo, Malik Renew trio has not been a combination that's worked very well so far this year. Just because the floor spacing doesn't work. I don't think it works for Bryson's game. I don't think it works for Indiana's game. So I think they're trying to kind of massage some of those rotations a little bit. And again, they're in a little bit of a rotation period too, where they're trying to figure out exactly what are we good at. And I think Miles Rice has to be the best player on this team. He had moments last year at Washington State where he's just tremendous in pick and rolls. And the one thing I've talked about with Indiana, like last year, they were a horrible pick and roll offense. Last year, they played big, and they were horrible on the glass. Like, those 2 things cannot stick this year. Like, they have to be better on the glass. So far, they have. And their pick-and-roll offense just has to be more dynamic.
He killed Sam Houston, but it's Sam Houston I'm talking about, Rice.
Excuse me, what did you say?
Rice killed Sam Houston, but then again, it's Sam Houston. Like, is that who you think he's capable? Yeah, I don't think he's not going to go 9 of 12 or whatever he was, but like he's capable. Is that what gives you like the kind of the Rice thing to go with those bigs?
You're right. It was Sam Houston. You're right. It's in Miami of Ohio, his biggest games. You know, I think he was really rough against Louisville and Gonzaga. But I think last year there were moments last year where he had 35 against Stanford. He had a game where he's just carving up UCLA for 18 points and 4 assists. Like, he was playing like one of the best point guards in the Pac-12 last year. Like, and this is a kid, remember, he beat cancer. Like, he's kind of coming back from trying to figure things out early system. We've seen a lot of transfers that have started a little bit slow. I don't think Indiana could be a Big Ten title contender in that tier 1 unless he starts to play like that. And I think if some of it does come down to Woodson adjusting some of his rotations to get Mackenzie McVaco to the 4, to get, you know, a little bit more floor spacing on there so he can get into his pick and rolls. It's hard for him to get to the rim when the paint's constantly clogged with 2 non-shooting bigs.
Isaac, before we get to the Big East, I'm going to lower my voice here because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this out loud. But am I crazy, or has Cooper Flagg been a little disappointing so far this year? Am I allowed to ask that question? I know he's basketball Jesus, but like, am I allowed to say that out loud?
Oh, Lord.
I can't get there with that.
Okay. All right. I mean, you know, I don't love the 42% from the field. That's all I'm saying. It's not my favorite. 22% for threes, not great. I'm just saying.
I think that's totally fair. Can I interest you in a generational defensive prospect, though, who like guards multiple positions on multiple plays? Like, you see him just go, like, he'll go guard the lead guard, then he'll go guard the top shooter, then he'll go guard the center, and then he'll switch onto the wing, then he'll go guard the 4. Like, that's more the path with him, especially as he kind of figures things out. And I think one underrated subplot with Flagg is last year at Montverde, They went 33-0 last year and barely played any close games.
Yeah.
So we've seen like some of these big game possessions late in the clock where it's like Flag has made a couple mistakes. This is some of the first time he's ever had an opportunity to make plays like that in late game situations in a while. So I've been really impressed with him defensively. I think it's fair that he's left a little bit to be wanted offensively at times, but he's a better shooter than 22% from three. If that number comes back, like he's second in Ken Palm's Player of the Year ranking right now, and he's not making threes. Like if those threes start to drop, I think he's a legit National Player of the Year.
Let me grab Nebraska real quick, just because we had some talk about Esigen again, and kind of who is he? And then there was the Michigan State, and it's like, I think Nebraska needs him to be pretty good if they are going to play big. When you look at this Nebraska team moving forward, who are some of the critical pieces for you, or who would you start with?
Yeah, for me, I'm really looking at these bigs and if they can pass. I think that really unlocked a lot of what Nebraska was great at last year. Casey Tominaga was phenomenal, but Rink Matt, I thought was their best player at times and maybe their most valuable player with what he was doing at that top of the key hub. And for me, it's like it's really come down to Berkshire Banyuksel, the transfer out of UCLA. Like, I loved his FIBA tape coming out a couple years ago. Like, you saw that playmaking there, and that was one of the things that really excited the UCLA staff when they got him. I think they need him to get healthy, up to speed defensively, to be that that top of the key hub that can run some of those dribble handoffs. Last year, Nebraska's dribble handoff game was one of the most efficient shots in basketball. And I think Esigen can be a huge part of that as that on the move shooter, but they need a big man that can, make the defense pay. Maybe sometimes you're faking that handoff and getting into the middle of the paint, hitting a floater or getting down to the rim. Like, you need someone who could spray it out and see the floor well. I think Banyuksel is the guy who can actually kind of execute that, and they need him. They really need him. So he's probably the biggest X factor for me moving forward, because I think what you're going to get from Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary. And the shot making from Esigen is going to come and go, but for the most part, we've seen it at the high major ranks. He can make shots. If Banyuksel can come back out, I'm not saying he is that yet, but if that type of version where you're talking about him as like a potential guy that could play in the NBA one day, I think the conversation around Nebraska really changes.
Isaac, let's stay in state here. We mentioned Creighton a little bit when we were talking about Kansas, but they've had kind of a strange year as well. Kind of get off to a hot start, hit a little skid in Vegas and against their in-state rival Nebraska, and then go on a 3-game winning streak, including beating number 1 Kansas. But in the midst of that, they lose Pop Isaacs for the year as well. Do you have any idea what to make of Creighton at this point in the year?
None.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's going to be interesting.
And then you have the Fedor thing just sitting out there, and nobody knows what's going to happen there either, which is also a total game changer if it happens, right?
Complete game changer if it happens. Because again, you're talking about one of the best, on the move shot makers. And then like the Larry Johnson thing was weird too. Like, I think a lot of people that really covered recruiting well were telling me that like this kid could really help them this year. And it's just,
he's a freak.
It's odd. It's really odd all the way around. It's been a season where, I think I like the idea of what Jemiah Neal could be on paper as like that long-armed, athletic wing defender that can really execute their drop coverage scheme really well, because he gets over the top of screens that can really rear view contest against some of those guys. But offensively, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say, right? It was like the 4 points against Kansas, then it's 19 against UNLV, and then it's like 5 against City. It's just like it's up and down. And I think that was kind of the MO with him out of Arizona State. So the Ashworth injury stunk. The Isaacs injury is even worse, because I thought he was a little bit of an analytics darling. I think a lot of people looked at him and go, oh, he shot 29% from 3 last year, not understanding how many tough shots he was taking and the quality of look that he was going to get at Creighton was going to be so much higher. So I don't know what to feel about them. I thought this was maybe the best team in the Big East starting. I think everybody put UConn 1. I was kind of pushing, like, I thought that Creighton could potentially get to 1 if Zujic could get healthy or get cleared, and if Isaacs was healthy all year long. But now I'm just like looking at this group like, what are they going to be awesome at? Like, I'm sure Greg McDermott will figure it out, but this is not the team that I was expecting to see in the preseason.
How close is, and I get it, what you just said about, UConn. Is that who you're are they right now who you're closer to? Are they closer to who you think they're capable of being?
It's a great question. I think lately their rim defense has gotten a lot better. They were turning Texas's water off at the rim. They did a much better job in the second half against Baylor at the rim. So I think that's part of this group's DNA that has to be there. Yes, you're not going to have Donovan Clingan, who is probably a generational type of shot blocker, but there were times where UConn was just getting beat relentlessly off the ball in Maui, and teams were just getting to the rim and finishing at will. That cannot be the case. So also, I kind of wonder if UConn's been a little bit unlucky defensively as well. Teams are shooting like 38% from three against them, and a bunch of those are contested three-point looks. So that could potentially come back down to earth a little bit. So I think, the UConn conversation always has to be a little bit nuanced. Everybody, I think, would love if Dan Hurley took it on the chin a little bit for some of his antics. And then there's a lot of like, hey, they lose, and now they go 0-3. Obviously, this team's not top 25 good, right? Like, I kind of disagreed. I think that they're a lot closer to what they are right now. I think this is a top 20 team in basketball. I don't think this is a top 5 team. I don't think this is a tier 1 national title contender, but this is a top 20 team in the sport because the offense is really good. And when healthy, they're going to have really good rim protection when Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed can avoid like picking up 5 fouls in 13 minutes.
That's Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports. And the thing you've been most right about today is you're right. I do want to see Dan Hurley take it on the chin. We appreciate your time as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. It's time for Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. It is warhorsecasino.com or the casinos in Lincoln or Omaha. And if you've been going there and you've been listening to DB, you'd be making some money right now. He was 2 for 3 yesterday, missed Illinois by half a point, but you might have bought the hook. I don't know. I know some of your friends bought the hook. And
well, a lot of these guys are like comboing stuff.
I know, because they're getting greedy.
So what's one? I didn't even know people like. So JB is killing.
Was he doing a teaser? Because then he would have won all 3 if he was doing a teaser.
So JB won.
Yeah.
My buddy.
Yeah.
Who I have not yet to say on air.
Yeah, we haven't named.
Did him. He took the hook. So he bought the hook. Then he like teased him with a bunch of football stuff, which he slaughtered. It was all Bengals stuff.
Is that Mr. Detroit Mercy?
Yep.
Yep.
And he had an 11 leg. So no, this was just a 3-leg teaser. Yeah, he crushed it. Dude, he took Rutgers +1, Illinois -2.5, and Arkansas +7.5.
Man. Yeah, so he teased those up to bigger numbers.
Yeah.
Or better numbers.
And won a fair amount.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Jeez.
Clean it up.
I think TK's crushing it too.
I'm not going to lie. I've made a little money off you. And not just riding your coattails on the radio show. I mean, with the picks.
Fudge. You guys are funny. Funny. I'm telling you, like my buddy that I said never talks.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And it couldn't be more opposite than his personality because he just doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And he showed me an 11-legger.
An 11-leg parlay?
Yes.
Or was it a teaser?
It's a parlay.
Did he win?
I don't know. I didn't get into it.
If he won an 11-legger, I mean.
Okay, so listen, I'm just going to read a couple.
Okay.
Cincinnati. So it was all same game.
Okay.
So Cincinnati.
He did 11 plays in the same game? My Lord.
So Cincinnati,
okay.
The -3, over 45, CeeDee Lamb to score a touchdown, Jamar Chase to score a touchdown.
Okay.
Joe Burrow passing TDs over 1.5.
Got it.
Burrow passing over 275.5. Did Aubrey make over 1.5 or over 1.5 field goals?
I'm checking right now. It was 20. So yeah, probably.
Incredible.
I'm checking right now. I'm checking on these stats right now because it's.
So that's the kind. I'm like.
Well, I smell bad.
That's some straight degenerate stuff right there.
Our guy JK is killing it too, or JV's killing it too.
Yeah. So let's see.
And he was sick for a while. How is this dude playing? And he was having surgery.
CD got the tutty.
Dude, that ball that Cooper Rush threw to CeeDee Lamb was
Yeah.
a way better throw than just CeeDee Lamb being wide open. They're like, oh, Hillman got beat, but I'm like,
No, that was a good throw.
it was a great
Yeah.
throw. Or Hilton. I said Hillman.
Aubrey had 2 field goals.
Yeah,
I think he cleaned that up. I think he got all of them.
yeah, he might have.
That's bonkers.
Same game.
Chase got him. Burrow got both of his.
So I follow a guy that
CD got his. That's dumb.
Twitter that does food. Like, he eats a ton, and then he I can't remember what the multiple is, but he jogs it off in terms of miles. So like one day, he'll do 12 miles. Maybe it's like a multiple of 1,000 or something of the calories.
Yeah.
Like, he'll just go out and run. Like, he looks pretty fit. So he said he's selling his car. He's doing an endorsement for a car dealership. So he sold his car for like $3,500, and he said he was going to turn around and play it on
I think I saw that.
the 3-leg parlay, the 3,000.
Yeah.
And he missed Cooper Rush's
200 yards passing.
passing.
It's like 183.
So I follow that guy.
Oh, do you?
He's always eating.
He just popped up on my algorithm. Because I watched a lot of gambling stuff.
Crumble cookies.
Oh gosh. Oh.
Yeah, he can eat. For a
Yeah, because he's not big.
No, he's a thin dude.
He is well, it's all the running, I guess.
That's
funny though.
Holy smokes.
What?
Tanner's got a degenerate friend too.
Do you
18 picks?
That's too many. You were doing too much, guys.
What?
I mean,
do you even like 18 things?
No, I don't. So the longer I've done this,
I'm more interested in Tanner by the day.
The longer I've done this, I'm gonna give him a pass on the Jimmy and Joe's.
No, it was a different unless he just came up with a screen name.
Oh, maybe might be a different Tanner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe he would. Maybe he would just use that as a screen name. I don't think it doesn't sound like it was that Tanner. I might be. I don't know.
The longer I've done this, the more I'm like, I like 2 or 3 things, maybe 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, 18,
and we're doing too much, guys. We are doing too much. There's just so. I mean, listen, I like a good prop. Don't get me wrong. I love a good prop bet, but 18.
Yeah.
I mean, your boy doing 11 is a little much.
Yeah.
But 18?
I'm telling you, man, it's not even his personality.
We're doing too much.
It's incredible.
You guys, I'm kind of more your style. You give me like 1 to 3 a day.
Just a handful.
Just a couple things.
Has to fit the criteria.
Just a couple things here.
You got to
and
look
there.
at that again. He tweeted it to us.
He did he? Okay, I'll go look
at it real quick. It's oh geez. Philadelphia Eagles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers under 27.5, under 28.5. Robert McIntyre, Aldrich Porkier, Jordan, Bills. Oh my goodness, he's all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not about that life.
Brisbane Bullets. Okay. Whoa, look at the wager though.
500 to win 22,000. Oh, so it's open. No, it's 500 to win 29.
It's open still.
But I'll take it. He must have hit enough that he can cash it out for 22. That's wild. That's wild.
So how does the cash out thing?
So I know how it works. I'll have to ask our friends at Warhorse if they do that at all, because not all sports books do it. But there is especially on parlays or on futures bets.
Yeah.
If the odds of something shift enough to where
they're going to have to pay out a ton,
either the chances of them having to pay out a ton increase to a certain point, they'll offer you a cash out. Like, you remember Deal or No Deal?
Yeah.
They're basically playing the banker, where they make you an offer to buy out your ticket so that they're not exposed for more than they want to be. On this one, it's kind of funny because the cash out's actually not that less. Like, I'd probably take that cash out and sacrifice the $7,000 difference.
I wonder what's still left.
Yeah, I'm trying to look here. I can't tell, but he's
like I said,
Brisbane Bullets. Isn't that like a cricket team?
Dude, I would take 500.
I think Brisbane's a cricket team. I think.
You know what I could do in New York
for $500?
Probably nothing.
That's fine. Go to Sbarro's.
What? No, the pizza place.
That's an Office joke. Sorry.
Yeah, not a chance.
Yeah,
I watch that still, by the way.
The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
That's when Michael goes to New York to corporate, and he's like, my favorite New York pizza place. Got to get a slice, and it's Sbarro's.
Yeah, he's on the street corner. That's low-key a good show.
Oh, I love that show. That's kind of one of my like comfort shows. I'll just throw it on in the background while I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah, I watch it because it comes on.
It's
all
on
the time I'm in the kitchen,
all the time,
and it's just in succession.
and it's easy to just kind of
That and I got. Did you ever get into Grimm?
no.
Yeah, it seems like Grimm is on a ton.
Yeah, I've never watched that. That's the one. It's
Like fairy tales, but it's real life.
yeah.
It's a little not happy and joy enough for you.
Listen, I watch some serious things.
But it doesn't make you happy.
I don't know what, but I do watch some serious things. Like Oppenheimer was pretty serious. I like that movie.
Yeah, probably not sitting through that.
Oh, it was a great movie. I'm fascinated by like nuclear physics though, so that's part of my.
I like to blow stuff up.
That's not true. There's a lot more to nuclear physics than blowing stuff up. Although in Oppenheimer, it was mostly about blowing stuff up.
The locks. I'm trying, TK. I'm trying to run the numbers, and I don't want to be rushed. So I might have to wait till next segment.
You know, we might have. We got time. We got time for you to get your locks. My
man Les is a genius.
Is it Vogler?
Yes.
Oh, Les, you see what shirt I'm wearing today, Les?
Oh, that shirt is hilarious.
Yeah, I'm wearing Les's shirt. It's the Vogler. Can I say that word on the radio?
Yes.
The Vogler Semen Center.
Yes.
He does artificial insemination of bulls or with bulls.
Yeah.
He says their motto is "We're pretty handy."
It's an eye-catching shirt.
It's a great shirt.
I love
it. You got the same color I did.
Yeah, I like this one. We love our
and it has it's got the great material.
Yeah, it's a good shirt. Here's what I'm betting on. I love this about Les. Is that's a guy that to his core understands our humor and gets the show.
Well, he's kind of the same way.
He made a comment yesterday about our nonsense that happened.
Yeah.
And he was telling somebody that had missed it because the stream was messing up. He said, "Go listen to it on the podcast. You will laugh your ass off." And I appreciate Les for that. That's what I'm betting on. I'm betting on how great our listeners are especially Les.
Oh, shoot.
Even if I call some of them stupid sometimes. Only occasionally.
You don't mean it.
Still love them.
No,
that's Bet on It, Brian Warhorse Sportsbook. We'll be back to wrap up the show. Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, reminding you to get out to Lawrence Gardens Bright Night celebration all throughout the month, running through December 31st. Make sure you get to lawrencegardens.org to see when Santa's going to be out there. Bring the kiddos out, bring the whole family, maybe do a little date night, whatever you want to do. It's a great place. They got 3 different sections for you. They've got the main section on the inside. They got kind of the greenhouse section. They got the outside. You can cook s'mores. You can hang out by Santa's igloo. It's a great time. Make sure you check it out. Get your tickets at lawrencegardens.org. You can check out the schedule there as well.
Can you drink hot chocolate there?
I believe they did have hot chocolate. Yeah.
Somebody was asking me if I knew of a place where they could go to for lights and stuff. And I was like, well, I might have a place, but I don't know if you can drink hot chocolate.
I think they got hot chocolate.
They need to take Kyle with them to complete the effect.
It's true. Kyle's a good hang. We like Kyle.
He's just funny.
He is funny. Kyle's a good dude.
Yeah.
I like him.
He puts up with us.
He's good natured, super good at what he does.
I know. Our friend thought I was crabby. I felt bad.
Oh, Mia.
But I snapped out of it.
You did. Yeah, you got going.
I snapped out of it.
It was a stressful week.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on. It had nothing to do with Lawrence. We love our friends at Lawrence.
Oh, yeah.
That was a Nebraska deal.
Yeah, man.
There was a lot going on. It was a stressful week.
She goes, there he is.
Yeah.
That's the one I like better.
You're like, go back to being the fun one.
Yeah, I don't know what my problem was. I mean, I did.
Yeah, it was very stressful. It was when all the defensive coaching departures was happening. Like I understood what was going on.
Yeah.
It was a stressful time. And apparently it's still a stressful time, even though we hired everybody. So it's fine. It's all good.
Oh,
for other people, not for us. I feel fine.
Yeah, it's just so funny because I remember it's like deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember like the Tony White concert. So BC's point was fantastic about Knighton.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ocam came, there were all these other guys that came, and Ocam came up again this time too. But
yeah,
like there was this hand wringing over hiring Coach Knighton.
Yeah, never coached in college before, barely coached in the NFL.
And could the 3-3-5 work in the Big
Had
Ten?
never recruited.
So you realize though there's still a lot of people that question whether the 3-3-5 can work in the Big Ten,
just by watching it work in the Big Ten for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this year they got the ball thrown over their head.
Yeah, a little bit. And it was still largely a very effective defense, despite the lapses.
Yeah.
Right?
But I go back. I mean, we've been here before, right? You know, Bo's two gapping didn't work unless you had a dominant D lineman. And I was like, well, any defense can work if you have a dominant D lineman.
That's true. If you have an Indominant
Then we tried to play. So, and we needed another Hague. Like, everybody has these grand opinions when
something doesn't work.
Yeah. But one thing I do think is I would not be down on John Butler because I don't think he can not coach secondaries.
Yeah.
He can.
He obviously can coach secondaries. He was doing it at the highest level.
And good at it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, both at the highest level in terms of his profession and at the highest level of that profession. I mean, I think this is fair. I don't think I'm exaggerating here. You'd have a hard time.
That probably means you're exaggerating.
I don't think I am. You can tell me if I am.
Okay.
You could call me stupid like I call other people stupid.
I don't even use that word.
What's the word you would use with Zoe? Like dum-dum?
Ding dong.
Ding dong? Okay. You can call me. That's what I call my dogs when they're being silly. So you call me a ding dong if I'm exaggerating here. But I think you can make the argument that John Butler as an NFL secondary coach was in the top 10% of NFL secondary coaches.
You could probably make that case.
Like, it wasn't just that he was coaching in the NFL. He was a very successful NFL secondary coach.
Let me ask you something. I'm just curious. Like, now I'm truly spitballing out loud. Do you think people that have strong opinions, what percentage of those people do you think know what it takes to coordinate a defense?
And I'm including myself in this. Very close to zero.
Really?
Yeah. 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 100%. Like,
you said it with such concern.
Well, okay. So I had the thing running through my head where you thought coaching was harder than brain surgery yesterday. And I thought that was a little ridiculous, but I do think it's really, really challenging. And I don't think.
Wait, you think that's ridiculous?
I do. Yeah. Well, I think your premise that the stakes not making the job more difficult is a ridiculous premise. I think the stakes of the job are one of the things that make it difficult. Personally, we obviously disagree there. But to your point,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If two people had the same skill sets, one was a neurologist, the other was a big time college football coach. You could do that. Going into 2025.
Yeah.
You think more people would pick to be a head college football coach than to be a brain surgeon?
I do.
I think you're crazy.
Maybe. I'm willing to entertain that I'm nuts. Maybe
you already have the skills.
Yeah, I understand that. You can basically, you're saying I'm a blank slate neutral person. I can pick which skill set I get, and I'll be well equipped for that job.
Yeah.
I pick the football coach every time.
You get fired first.
Yeah, and then I would go on my buyout and be fine, and no one has died.
So it's
about the stakes. The stakes matter a lot to me there.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean the degree of difficulty, though.
I think it does. People dying increases the degree of difficulty a lot, I think. And that's not to say I'm not in any way diminishing how hard it is to coach college football right now, because I agree with you for the most part, just not in the most extreme examples. But to your point about defensive coordinators, I don't think anybody who's never done it or has never been around it has any idea what, like, unless you've been a football coach at a decently high level, you have no idea what it takes. And I'm including myself in that. Just like, what?
This is a doctor.
Okay.
And a good one.
Okay.
One that opens people up.
Okay.
He's nuts if he thinks someone wants to be a head football coach. How about that?
I think let's go ask Coach Rhule if he wants to be a brain surgeon.
If he had the prerequisite skills.
You think he'd go for it?
He'd still get to impact people's lives. I bet you he would.
Okay.
I think you're underselling the degree of difficulty.
I am really,
and the number of people you deal with. It's a walking headache.
I understand that. So is brain surgery, literally. That's a headache.
And
joke.
He makes a good point. He says, and I know football. He played at a high level.
But to your point, I think if you have not coached at a high level, you cannot have a good grasp on what it takes to coordinate a defense. I think it's incredibly complicated, and I think I have a pretty good.
You watch me struggle, and it's just high school.
Yeah,
but it's very nuanced.
Yeah, I watch you go through it, and I think a pretty good football knowledge base, and I have no idea even for high school level what all goes into it. And we talk through it a decent amount because I'm curious.
Yeah,
but there's a lot that goes into it that I would have no idea. Just in the same sense, and I think football is harder than basketball, but maybe it's because I know basketball better, so I'm more comfortable with it. Maybe that's the brain surgery thing.
Fewer pieces too.
Yeah, there are fewer moving parts and whatever. But also, like, I would think that most people who haven't done it have no idea what they're doing if they're like evaluating a kid from high school to college.
There are just so many variables.
Yeah. There's so many variables, and you're dealing with so many people and so many different headspaces and mindsets and things like that. Like, unless you've done it or have been around it, I think it's really difficult to know what goes into coordinating a defense. So when you ask me how many people that are being critical know what it's like, the answer is much closer to 0 than it is to even 10%. I would guarantee that.
All right.
I'd bet on that. I know that
I'm
was
not going to let it move my needle so much. I don't know why I let it bug me. It's just, I think there's this part of me that thinks like, I don't want people to think like that. It's just
I get it. Too negative.
You're closing yourself off.
That's why I got mad at the texter earlier, because that's a thing that you don't have to understand coordinating a defense to understand that Nebraska's obviously serious about winning football games. Obviously. Like, if you can't see that, I can't help you.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I get frustrated with stuff like that, because there's things I don't understand. And there's things I disagree with that I don't think are stupid, despite what some people believe. Like, I disagree with you on the brain surgeon thing. I don't think it's stupid. I think it's a ridiculous premise. I don't think you're stupid for buying into it, right? There's a difference. Like, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that the stakes don't make the job more difficult. I truly believe they do.
Relative to these two jobs.
Yeah, I think the stakes make it I think that's a key part in difficulty of a job. But I don't think you're stupid for disagreeing with me. I do think it's absurd and stupid to think Nebraska's not serious about winning football games. Now, are they going to win those games? I have no freaking idea. None at all. But you cannot objectively look at the way Coach Rhule has approached his staff and approached hiring and approached this entire job and think he is anything but serious about winning football. I don't know how you can do that and be a serious person. I don't. That's where I get frustrated, because that's something everybody can see. The defensive stuff, I give a little bit of leeway on, because I know there's things I don't understand. And I know there's things that a lot of people like me who are really big football fans and know a decent amount about football don't understand. But there's some things that are obvious to everyone, or should be obvious to everyone. That's where I get frustrated.
Is that Nebraska serious about winning games?
Yeah. I don't even know what to do with that, except just wash it off my shoes like I stepped in dog crap.
Shane, how much? I can't see the clock.
30 seconds, maybe?
40 seconds.
Hey, do you have that clip queued up from the question that I asked BC?
I don't have that, no.
We'll play it tomorrow. We'll get it going tomorrow.
It's food for thought.
I told we got the social team working on it for clips too, for the internet, for Twitter and everything, because you asked a very smart question and I was really proud of you.
This dude is on a 2-day bender, y'all. A 2-day bender.
Listen, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I don't know how you do it. I said that first thing when we got in here this morning.
I'm definitely crabby. Don't get me wrong.
I was like, DB, I don't know how you do this every day, man.
Struggle's real.
That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. We will be back tomorrow with more Hurrdat Sports Radio.